an inspiring moment for me to sit next to a person who has done so much for the planet and he's doing a lot to make this world a better place.
At the moment, I run a couple of consultancies, one focusing on the smart cities and technology side, so helping sort of technology deployment into cities, trying to make cities a better space. And then sitting behind that is a consultancy that's looking at critical minerals. And so these are minerals and metals that are critical to the long-time sustainability of existence of humanity and us getting towards a cleaner and greener planet. And so my career trajectory is very non-linear. I was always somebody who thought outside of the box and in ways that often most people would never quite understand until I had got to the end goal.
If it's guided by the morality of the religion, I feel that can produce much better purpose-driven professionals and humans than otherwise. They say letting go of a bad habit is much more important than starting a new one, because getting rid of a bad habit is already a good habit. Right?
Everyone has to go. Everyone's gonna go. But those relationships, those emotions, they are human. If the rest of creation, the Prophet ﷺ had those emotions, went through those emotions, who are we?
Yes.
And so that really helped me in terms of my understanding of these things.
What kind of initiatives are there for the future? What's happening right now? And how can businesses benefit from your services?
ESG is fantastic when you're sitting in the corporate offices in London, but when you're down in a lithium mine or a cobalt mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you've got child labor and bonded labor and a whole host of other horrible, unethical practices taking place. They're going to be mined regardless of what's happening in the world, because they are needed for your electric vehicles, they are needed for your day-to-day devices, your mobile phones, all of these things, beyond just the sustainability element of it. So if I put her, am I doing her justice by staying here and putting her through an education system that I can see is failing? It's only, in my eyes, is only going to get worse before it gets any better. So am I failing her as a father by forcefully pushing her through that education system and then reducing her outcomes and opportunities at the end of?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
How are you?
Alhamdulillah, not too bad.
Jazakallah khair. Alhamdulillah, Jazakallah khair for being here. It's a great, inspiring moment for me to sit next to a person who has done so much for the planet and he's doing a lot to make this world a better place. I would let you introduce yourself, because there's a lot that we can cover, and I'll be here for a while if I start going through your profile. So if you can touch upon those, and then we'll have a fireside chat about how you became what you have become and things like that.
Sure, no problem. So, assalamu alaikum, everybody. My name is Jawad Sardar. I am a smart cities / ESG and I say critical minerals specialist at the moment. So, quite a few things, as you said, and we'll delve into deeper details as we speak. But at the moment, I run a couple of consultancies, one focusing on the smart cities and technology side, so helping sort of technology deployment into cities, trying to make cities a better space. And then sitting behind that is a consultancy that's looking at critical minerals and sort of the access to critical minerals and the supply of critical minerals, which within the name itself kind of defines what it is in the sense of these are minerals and metals that are critical to the long-time sustainability of existence of humanity and us getting towards a cleaner and greener planet. And so that's myself. I'm based just down the road in Watford and born and bred here in the UK, and have held multiple positions across both government and outside of government throughout the last 14 years of a professional career.
So the UK government, can you tell a little bit more about?
Yeah, sure. So my last engagement with the UK government was I was a specialist for the Department for now Business and Trade. So at the time it was called the Department for International Trade. So this is the department within government that looks after everything going out from the UK. So all of your businesses that are exporting everything from goods to services to products out of the UK, and any sort of investment coming in from markets into the UK. And my specific role was looking after the sort of post-Brexit markets. So I was looking after sort of smart cities and technology trade in Brazil, South Africa, Nigeria, Turkey, and then the Southeast Asia bloc, which is the ASEAN bloc, Malaysia, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Myanmar, and Philippines as well. So what that role sort of entailed was me leading the UK business engagement with both government and also other business entities in those markets, helping UK technology companies, helping UK smart cities companies access opportunities there. But sort of lying on top of that was a aid program that we were delivering into those countries, so 19 cities across those 10 countries, helping the governments understand smart cities, how technologies could be deployed to help their large cities be managed better, resources managed better. And so the government put in about £150 million into that. So I oversaw the sort of delivery of that. And then on the back end of that was trying to then secure commercial opportunities that come from that. And so that role I ended in September of last year to then continue my private consultancy. I still work very closely with government, but in a non-governmental sort of space. Even just to also clarify, just when I was an advisor or I was as an external specialist, I was never a bureaucrat. I was brought in as an industry specialist to come in and look after these things.
Excellent. That's a very varied, wide, global, and quite an interesting combination of expertise. Uh, Great to hear that there is somebody who is a specialist in their field and advising the government and non-government organizations to go. So the UK government trying to enter a market or try to source some goods into the
Yeah,
UK.
so both. So it's about one establishing. So obviously after 2016 Brexit, we had to try and find, Europe being our biggest trading partner, we had to go and find new markets that we could start to sort of replace some of those trade opportunities. And so we were looking at sort of the fast growth developed markets, and so all the ones that I mentioned, the Brazils, the Turkeys, the South Africas of the world, and also the ASEAN bloc, because ASEAN is in terms of a trading bloc, that's it's significantly sort of comparable or even larger than Europe as a trading bloc, with a close knit community of I think it's around 19 countries, where there's a lot of intertrade and there's a huge market there, a young market that can be tapped into. So the idea was to try to access opportunities, continue to build what we classify as soft power, so sort of influence in those markets, and trying to establish a larger presence, because these are traditionally not markets that we have huge sort of presence in. There's places where we could increase our market capitalization, and so the idea was to go there, work on a government to government basis and also government to business basis to try to help UK PLC win more work, and then also attract some investment from those markets into the UK, into variety of opportunities there in UK, be it in sort of green energy, be it in technology, be it in sort of manufacturing. And there's a few sort of projects that have come as a result of that, sort of particularly sort of investment from Turkish entities into the UK. But that was sort of the crux of that role and what I was looking at.
Great. Excellent. So these kind of roles, when you play those roles, uh, tell us a little bit more about your journey. So how did you end up becoming what you have become? That's one part of it. Uh, do you need to do a memory jog of your early age and how you were nudged into shape and becoming this specialist? Related to that is, what roles did the environment, your parents, your elders, your mentors play
Yeah.
in helping you shape up your personality and your career and your choices?
Yeah, so just on the career basis, because this is and this comes with a disclaimer, because it's my career trajectory is very non-linear. I was always somebody who uh, thought outside of the box, and in ways that often most people would never quite understand until I had got to the end goal. And a sort of a small example of that is sort of how I chose my A levels and why I chose my A levels when I was completing my GCSEs. Um, I purely based my A levels on my end goal of completing a degree that would increase my levels of employability. Nothing to do with anything that I liked or anything that I enjoyed. So I went into A levels at the time thinking I was going to become a forensic scientist. I had a huge interest in that
Forensic
space.
scientist.
Yeah, it was something I was hugely interested in. There used to be a program, it just slipped my mind at the moment. There used to be a program I used to watch on TV at the time that used to be around. It was a drama series, and I may recall the name at some point, but I used to watch that quite sort of keenly, and I wanted to try to explore that as an opportunity. And so I entered my A levels, taking on biology, chemistry, and psychology, and then and also religious studies, because I had a huge sort of interest in religion, and I'll get onto that in a small while. But then deciding at the end of the 2 years of A levels that employability was purely down to your skill sets, and having done a lot of market research, speaking to my older brother, my relatives, and people who I deemed as being successful, I realized that, there was nothing more employable than degrees in three subjects:
Okay.
maths, chemistry, and physics.
Mm-hmm.
And then biology follow those three closely behind. But everyone who I saw as successful, be it in financial spaces or, at the time I was sort of keen interest in things like investment banks and, those high flying sort of roles and jobs in the city. And everybody you would speak to would be, actuarial scientists and those sort of things. They will be from a from a maths or a scientific background. And so I chose chemistry as a degree
Oh.
purely on that basis. I I hated the subject. I really did not enjoy the subject, but I could do it. So I could do it to a certain a level of sort of success. And so I chose that as a degree, and I went to Aston University in Birmingham, which was one of the best business schools in the country at the time. I think still is. And so I did a very unique degree program, which was the first of its kind. So I sort of set a path that I think a few people have followed since then. But I did a 50-50 degree in chemistry and business.
Oh,
So
wow.
to try to take advantage of the Aston Business School as the entity that it was and the access it had to the business world. Um, I went into it at the time it was called a combined honours, and then they changed the name to interdisciplinary studies, a 50-50 degree, where 50% of my degree was chemistry and 50% was business and pure business. So looking at things like project management, international management, these sort of things.
So was that clear when you were making the choice for the degree? That degree didn't exist.
It didn't exist.
So you entered a degree and then you
No, so no. So they had this program where they were doing interdisciplinary studies, so combined honors. So there was people doing chemistry and maths, people doing chemistry and biology, people doing various mixes. And Aston University was sort of pioneer in this type of
Mhm.
degree. So I reached out to at the time the head of the sort of enrollment into university and said, look, I want to do chemistry, but I really want to benefit from you as a business school, because I think it was second or third in the world in the country after Cass Business School and the Warwick Business School at the time. So I was kind of keen in trying to make sure I really take advantage of that. And so we had a I had a very open conversation with the head of the enrollment at the time, and he proposed me to take a look at the opportunity of maybe doing chemistry and business as a combined honors. And then we set that sort of thinking process into motion, and we ended up creating a sort of program. And I was the first to take this on. And whilst I was in university, I think there's two or three other people who followed in the years junior to me. But yes, I went on to a degree that was sort of almost purpose built for me to be chemistry and business,
Wow.
50-50. And so yeah, it was a unique opportunity for me to go in, and I knew the chemistry skills would make me very employable in terms of the analytic skills, the numerical skills that I would gain from that. But then I also then wanted to make sure that I was, in terms of business ready and being ready for the real world, to understand sort of, because I never studied business studies, I never did any of those things, and so I just wanted to make sure that I was things. So I was very purpose driven. So like I said, from a young age to go into the degree purely for its end goals, and nothing around sort of enjoyment or anything like that. And I my lecturers will be sure to tell you that I barely attended sort of some lectures. It was one of those things. It just
Well,
like,
it's just like,
yeah, it was. I did it just for that end goal. And one of the reasons I actually chose Aston University as well is because at the time they were, again, one of the only universities that mandated a industrial placement in your degree. So it's a 4-year degree where you had to do 1 year in industry in order to qualify for the end degree, which is when we'll get onto that, was something that then reshaped my life. So that placement year that I did, I think I can quite confidently say is probably the best placement year that any student has ever done. Um, in probably the history of Aston University, and maybe I'd be happy to go into a competition with anybody across the UK to see if they've had a better placement than what I did. And so yeah, so that kind of shaped in that sense. So very non-linear, very sort of specific decision making, and things that again don't always make perfect sense to people who don't quite understand my mindset. But going back to what you mentioned about family life and the role of parents and um, sort of role models early on to try to shape my life. Now, I'm second. It's an immigration where we're second generation. I'm second generation immigrant. So my father came over to UK at a very young age in the 60s. He himself was an orphan, born into, not quite poverty, but not too far away from poverty. He was actually born in a refugee camp because he originated from the Indian side of Kashmir. And then during partition, his parents were forced to move over to Gujranwala, near Lahore. He was born there in the camp, and then they moved over to a place called Kotli in Azad Kashmir, with the view to at some point move back over the border, which as you know, never sort of materialized. He then lost his father at a very young age. And so at the age of around 15, 16, he then arrived into the UK. And I'm sure your listeners will sort of understand that sort of mechanism and that whole journey of how a lot of our Kashmiri sort of families came into the UK. So he came into the UK at a very young age, had completed a certain level of education in Pakistan, but when he got to the UK, he got a role at a factory as a sort of labourer, but didn't sort of sit idly. He went and sort of enrolled himself into a local college, taught himself English to a very proficient level, writing, reading, speaking, and then went from sort of working 18-hour days on his own here to then setting up businesses. So him and his cousin set up a logistics business, doing very well in Watford. We're competing with DHL at the time, before DHL ended up getting huge amounts of investment come in. But then sort of like towards the back end of his career, was sort of the owner of a very large taxi base in Watford. And so, I grew up seeing him being a hard worker, dedicating his sort of life into that, making sure he earned his money with his hands and, not sort of relying or sitting around. He never um, allowed us to sort of just kind of loiter around and scrounge off of sort of the government or anything else otherwise. And everyone's situation and circumstances is different, but he was very much so working. So that also impacted my life. So at a young age, we didn't see dad that often. So, he used to work nights, in terms of, he used to work 16, 17 hours a day, and it was only really at home to kind of sleep. And that used to be during the daytime. So then, he would come back to home around 4 or 5 in the morning, get to bed, and he wouldn't wake up until maybe 2, 3 in the afternoon. And then it's just about breakfast and things, and then back out to work. And so very sort of limited, but understood. When I grew up, I started to understand the sort of sacrifices that he was making to try to ensure that we had a better life. One thing that he never compromised on was, despite his sleeping cycles, he was always up at 8 o'clock in the morning to drop us to school. Enrolled us into the best schools he could possibly have done at the time. So I was based in a we were living in a space slightly on the outskirts of Watford, but he enrolled us into Castleberry School at the time, which was probably the best junior school in Watford. And he would drop us every day, pick us up every day. And that dedication, just to make sure that, our educational lives were not impacted by his working life. And kind of seeing that from an early age, that really sort of instilled a working ethic within me that, look, you are in charge of your circumstances. Okay, there's external factors, but till you don't put that effort in yourself, you're not going to really achieve your goals. And so, and my mother was, like I think the majority of our sort of Pakistani Muslim sort of households, the mother took on a role as sort of the full-time caregiver at home, but did it in a way that she also, whatever she could do to make sure that we were on the right path, and instilled both religious and cultural ethics within us to make sure that we knew from very early years who we were, what we were, and how to sort of manage ourselves in a very different world to where we are now. So, we were very much minorities when we were growing up in schools. I was only one of 3 other non-white people in the entire sort of infant school. The other 2, one was my sister and one was my relative. And so, we grew up in very different circumstances to what it is now. And so, and the mother played a key role in that, from a young age, she made sure that we learned Urdu. I speak Urdu proficiently. I read Urdu proficiently. And that's purely due to my mother making sure we had that connection to our culture. And obviously, very early, from the age of I think 4, starting religious studies, and coming home from school, and then mother making sure that we are studying the Quran, learning the Quran, and taking us to the sort of madrasa at the time. And so these things were from a very early age sort of instilled a understanding and a connection with both the culture and the religion, which then played a huge role in my life as I sort of grew up. And so, yeah, so like again, going back to your question around that, parents played a integral role in shaping who I am and what I'm have sort of achieved in my life. And sure, going into the future, whatever I do, it's all going to be sort of born out of that foundation that they set for me.
Great, excellent, great to hear. So the hard work and resilience of your dad and his commitment to dropping you off and picking you up from school, irrespective of his tough schedule, and your mom supporting and holding the fort while your dad was trying to work so hard and doing so many things, and making sure that you stay connected with your culture, you know your language, and then you also connect with your creator through the spiritual, religious knowledge. Um, I think this, like, hats off to your parents. It's from those tough situations where your dad came in and then establishing himself, growing the businesses, growing or nurturing all of you, and then uh, maintaining that family, and then your mom establishing the household, converting it into a home. Uh, Many people can't even relate to most of these things. They are so stuck in their rat race, they forget about their children, they forget about their spouse, their wife is also working, there's nobody taking care of the home, nobody is developing or nurturing the next generation, the values are not instilled, the culture is lost, the children are being raised by the caretakers, and they are instilling their culture into them, and later on, when these children grow up, there's a huge disconnect.
Yeah.
They have to live 3 or 4 different personalities while living in the same house. I feel for my teenagers or my next generation who are going through this a lot more than where we were.
Yes. It is a difficult. It's difficult, and again, there's elements of that I relate to. I think one thing that all of us as sort of second and third generation immigrants will go through is the identity crisis,
Identity.
and 100% myself, and I'm sure my siblings will speak on this too, can speak on this too. Is we had the same issues. We had this identity crisis. So we had a father, very hardworking, had learnt English, taught himself English, and could speak it. I had a mother who couldn't speak English.
Couldn't. Oh yes.
And so, there was this identity crisis. And it's a fantastic point that you picked up on there, because um, it was a huge battle that I think us growing up we had to engage with. We had to try to overcome. And again, there's many stories, even in this small sort of communities that we live in here in Watford and St Albans, where there's some individuals who unfortunately sort of lost that battle in terms of identifying with a certain sort of, or identifying with their own culture and where they come from, and losing themselves with maybe external sort of influences. And there's others who sort of held on to that. And so it was something that we all went through. I went through growing up, trying to identify who I am. Like, so where do I come from? Um, what are the integral sort of values that I should be sort of embedding within myself? I was hearing one thing from parents, and then hearing something quite different in schools, and slightly different in friend circles. And it's a very sort of different thing. And I think one thing, again, hats off to my parents and all of that generation, is they took that huge leap of faith, moving from the home countries to this country without understanding the cultures, without knowing the cultures, and almost threw us into the lion's den. Because as anybody, especially the youngsters sort of listening to this, will identify with, a lot of our parents didn't understand the struggles of what we were sort of encountering in our schooling systems.
Yes.
These things that they never had encountered throughout their lives.
Yeah.
They didn't know about the drink. They didn't know about the drugs. They didn't know about these sort of relationships and these things, which in our culture and our religion are sort of are not accepted. And so then having that battle, and then the sort of uh, trying to manage the situation of how much you can bring back home and speak to your parents about, and that we have this thing in our culture around shalom and having that level of respect for your parents, where you couldn't quite bring everything home. And so I completely understand that struggle, and it is, and that's where I think role models outside of the home
Hmm.
play a huge role in this. I was lucky to find an incredible mentor who unfortunately I lost just a few months ago. My teacher who taught me Quran and taught me everything to do with religion.
Hmm.
A local imam in Watford, very well known. He he, for me, throughout my life was a pillar, who I could always rely on. Somebody who, despite his background in religion and very sort of intensive studying of religion from a young age, from maybe 5 or 6 when he entered the madrasa system, he was just so in tune with what was going on around him, where he could um, help us as the youth growing up at the time, um, bring together the teachings of what the religion was expecting from us and the difficulties of the society that we were living in at the time. And he played a huge role in my life, a major role throughout sort of every aspect of my life, the various crises I went through, the various ups and downs. He was there. He was my sort of pillar who I could rely on outside of parents, where certain things I couldn't discuss with my dad, I couldn't discuss with mum, I could discuss with him. I could give him a call. He was somebody who was available at any time of the day. I could call him at 2 o'clock in the morning, be awake because he's studied throughout the night. I could call him in the afternoon, he would be awake, and he was always there. And so yeah, it was an unfortunate loss for myself. Back in September, he had a short but intensive battle with cancer, and he unfortunately passed away. But um, you know, going back to that question around sort of those difficulties and how you can kind of overcome them. It's trying to find these sort of role models outside of the house, and I think us as sort of slightly the older generation need to now sort of step up to make sure that we are there and available for the youngsters, to make sure that we can engage with them, we can speak to them, we can help them, and we can say to them sort of, look, we understand those difficulties you're going through. We've been there, and try to be a guiding sort of light for them.
Hmm.
And so without that in my life, I definitely would have struggled. And I saw unfortunately people around me who didn't have that, and sort of the difficulties they went through. And so that all kind of played an integral role in sort of shaping me and who I am as a person.
So, related to that is, how did you make that connection with your mentor? How did you know that he was the mentor, and how did he give you space into his very tough schedule? I'm sure he'll be in such in demand. So relate. I just want you to go deeper, because what I see in this current generation is they are very quiet. They're very introvert. They're too much into their devices. Yes. They are even friends, very close friends, sitting together. They're socializing, is messaging each other and using social media while sitting each other and messaging each other and sending jokes to each other and having no eye contact. That is one of the biggest challenges that the job market is seeing as well. The interviews, less than 50% are making eye contact in an interview, which is a big disaster. All of that, and their choices are strange as well, according to the norms that of their industry. Which some are great because they're challenging the status quo, especially this purpose orientation and how they only want to work for the businesses that add value to this planet
Yeah,
or to the people. They don't want to waste time in something that is exploiting people or is harmful to anybody, people or the planet. So, leaving all of that aside, the core question for this point is: you went to a madrasa, you found a teacher, which most of them have,
mm,
but you connected with him and you got that comfort level where you could ask him, you could see that there is somebody you can reach out to beyond your household.
yeah.
Finding that connection and making that connection. Tell us more about that. How do you
That's purely on him, and I think that's where the onus is on us now to do that for our youth. So as a youngster at the time, maybe 6, 7, 8 years old. So it was him making the religion interesting for me to study,
Mhm.
and giving me that knowledge and that sort of instilling that sort of um, drive to learn a bit more about religion, but also presenting the religion in a way where I could understand that this person understands my day-to-day sort of struggles. So, sort of around namaz and salah and prayers, and sort of instead of being very hard-lined and taking that old school approach,
Yes.
he had a way of explaining to us on how we should sort of approach prayers and in line with our schooling and our sort of jobs and these sort of things where we would fall in love with the concept of prayer,
Mm.
where we don't see it as a burden and a fear from Allah. Oh no, he's going to punish us if we don't do it, which is obviously, but it's about, okay, this is an obligation upon me. I need to do it, so I need to try to fit this into my schedule.
Mm.
And it was that teaching approach that he took with us that made me understand that, okay, this person is somebody who I can go to because I can see that he's understanding certain things. And obviously, he had this experience of teaching and had been in the UK for about 20 years before I encountered him. So he had a, a very and being somebody of the community, he had lots of people coming to him with their troubles.
Yes.
And so he saw things that we could only ever sort of
Mm.
couldn't even imagine half the time. So he had that experience. He had that understanding of what the problems the youth were going through, the elders were going through. He had that, and he incorporated those things into his teaching, and that just created that relationship. And I had times where I was slightly distant from him, but what he instilled upon me was a belief system where there was no problem that I couldn't find a solution to from the religion,
Mm.
and
Yeah.
and it was just about finding a person who understood it in the right way. And unfortunately, one thing again, not sort of speaking bad about elders or anything otherwise. I think one slight detrimental thing within our communities was some of our elders within the religious spaces coming over with very um, deeply rooted and immovable sort of cultural practices in terms of their way of teaching and their way of approaching things. Only having one language and what that did was it alienated a lot of the youth. And even with my teacher, he didn't speak great English, but he put in an effort to try to communicate with us in as good English that he could do, which again was something that we appreciated. I appreciated.
Mm.
That isn't always the case. You don't always find that here in the masajid. It's not something that's commonplace. It wasn't commonplace at the time, which meant that a lot of the youngsters and the youth didn't find that space within the religion.
Attractive.
And so, one thing he instilled with me was that, look, the religion is complete in terms of a lifestyle. You just need to try and find the answer to your particular problem, and again, if you can find the right person to approach, and then thankfully, it was just, I think, again, prayers of my parents that throughout my life I found people who could play that sort of integral role and who I could keep approaching for those sort of issues. But it was purely him as a mentor, as a community leader, making himself available. And so again, like I said, the onus is on us to ensure that we are allowing that message to get to the youth that, look, we're here, we're available. We understand the sort of issues you may be going through, and not expecting them to make the approach, in the sense that, if they're in their sort of cocoon and in a very insular sort of space where they're not really communicating with their peers and not communicating with parents, then it's going to be very rare that they step out of that comfort zone and come to you for support without them knowing that you are there. And it's about trying to access those spaces that they feel comfortable in, maybe those activities they feel comfortable in. With us, it was, we had to go. We were in madrasa 2 hours every day for
2 hours every day
5 to 7 every day, Monday to Friday
after school.
after school. And so that was regimented.
That would ruin your sports and things.
Yeah, so those things, these are things that we sacrificed on, and but despite that, I think I'm gonna say this very sort of hesitantly, in the sense that I don't want to offend anybody, but I think we were a bit more resilient than I think some of the generations after us have become, in the sense that we kind of made good with what we had. So, for instance, I love sports. I was a fanatic cricket football fan, and fanatic of cricket. I used to love playing cricket, but anything cricket wise just couldn't fit in with my dad's schedule. So he was giving up his sort of, I know it sounds really bad, but he was trying to set up a future for us. He came over with nothing, and he had, like many of his peers, he had to also support families back in Pakistan.
Yes.
So, him taking his time out to make sure that our schooling was going well, I think that was a huge sort of commitment from him. So then expect him to then take time out to then take me to cricket practice, take me to cricket matches, it wasn't going to happen.
So yes.
But we lived in a different society then where there was much more trust. And so I used to go to cricket games with neighbors, so the parents and go with, and it was very different. But we still maintained that. We still did that. We used to study to school until 3:30 in the afternoon, go to madrasa 5 to 7. And any time that we found outside of that, we didn't have the devices. We weren't sort of tied into those things. Down at the local park, over to sports training, to matches, and alhamdulillah, I went to a very decent level in cricket.
Right.
Before I had a sort of a health matter that made sort of I had to then give up. But I did all that. I did all that through community sport. So it was us as friends getting together and finding lifts to the matches, and it used to be quite comical if I look back now and I think, I don't think it can ever happen in the youth now, the way we used to do it. Get together and ring one person, and he used to then collect all of us, and we used to, it's just one of those things. And so, but yeah, we did that. So that was a routine. And so, um, again, we were pushed into that space, and madrasa space, which then obviously allowed me to meet the mentor. Less likely to happen now. So it's about people now, us identifying where the youth are, what their spaces are, and making sure we are available in those spaces rather than expecting them to come to us.
Okay, wonderful. That's great. Some great advice there. I think the core key points that you mentioned, I would say this shifting of this responsibility. The previous generation, because of all their constraints, they were trying to establish themselves. So it was more of a survival for them. Despite all of those complexities, you managed to navigate and you utilize the community and the external support to enable all of that. While being highly resilient, you would actually go to the full-time school plus the 2 hours of madrasa every day. So finishing school at 3:30 and then starting the 5 to 7, another one. I can imagine the weekends would be like you would have a breather, right?
Yeah.
And getting to that point where community leaders, they play their roles in shaping and nurturing the youth, right? So your imam in that case was the core role model who was there for you in case you were having, and I'm sure we don't need to go into those details, but as a Muslim boy or a girl going to a school, especially secondary school in the UK or any Western country, it's incomprehensible by those who have not been raised here, like myself. Our schools there in Pakistan so they were single sex, but then we were so respectful of the teachers and the environment and the strict regime around us that we would study. I would study 12 to 14 hours a day. And for that, I won't even do any sport because my dad said, we were again coming from that very humble beginnings. I had 3 elder sisters, they had to get married, and I was the only one who's going to be the breadwinner. So he said, work hard and do what you have to do, right? So I didn't have any access to any sports, and I lost interest. So I was thin, tall. I could run fast. I could do fast bowling and do whatever. I could see people doing it, but I had no clue how to run fast. I was probably the slowest runner in the whole class. I couldn't play a sport at all, like very little. I liked my friends doing it well, but I never missed it. I was like, yeah, it's okay. I'll study. I'll study. And that still continues. I love learning. I love the things that you're telling me because that's what motivates me, gives me intrinsic motivation. But this religious touch where yes, there is nurturing. Yes, there is a pursuit of excellence, ihsan. If it's guided by the morality of the religion, I feel that can produce much better purpose-driven professionals and humans than otherwise. So, for the imams to be accessible, relatable, and to share and make it a safe, psychologically safe environment where you can ask whatever you want and they won't be judgmental and they won't be sharing that with your parents directly saying, oh, this was happening, right? Because these drugs and drinks and girls and all those clubs and everything else used to exist and they still do. The only difference is people had to go out of their house to get in. Now they're sitting in their, wherever they are, it's in their hands. and it's so easily accessible, all this junk, and it's ruining people's minds. The imams and these mentors in the community and us who are the next generation going to carry this forward, it's our responsibility to make that psychological safety. I personally, myself, I can speak of, despite trying so many times and in so many different forums, I still can't break through.
Yeah.
I still feel that the ice exists, that ice breaking has to happen.
Yeah.
They're not comfortable in reaching out.
And it is. I think the task is tougher now. There was a number of factors. So, for instance, you mentioned the drink, the drugs, the girls, the clubs. These are all things that took place in a physical space back when we were growing up. You had to actively take a step, go out, and there was always this fear of being caught.
Yes, community.
And with our communities, 70-80% of our elders are all taxi drivers and things. And so you had this fear, right? Not saying that we didn't engage in those activities, but there was this element of, again, going back to Sharm and Barrio, and like, yeah, and you kind of you had this thing, okay, he might see me, and you had that sort of barrier. Much more difficult now because, like I said, everything is in a closed room. It's on a device. It can be hidden in spaces where, if you're not entirely computer literate and technology literate, you're not going to understand.
Yeah, exactly.
And obviously, the kids are so much more advanced and tech savvy now, where it's easy for them to make sure that even somebody who's semi-illiterate can never get hold of those things or see those things on their devices. So it's a very different sort of difficulty and very different sort of approach that we need to take on this. But what I would say is that what we can learn is from the innovation of our elders. So, for instance, my imam, he didn't go through the troubles that I went through, but he, because of his rooting within the religion, knew how to adapt his teachings to then my environment, which is something that we need to try to do. If we've been brought up with good ethics, good morals, and good teachings, like they were adapted for us, because the generations before us didn't go through the same troubles we did, but those teachings were adapted for us. We then need to be able to adapt those for the new generations, the ones who are so tech sort of reliant and in that space 24/7. And so it needs to come from us. We need to bring that innovation, and that ties in closely again to business and success in business, where we drive in terms of, as a consultant, we talk about innovation day and night. Oh, innovate, innovate, innovate. But we don't bring those things into our daily life, to our teachings. And you need to understand that with every passing generation, the difficulties and problems change, not in their nature, but in their sort of form. So the drink, the drugs, the girls, the boys are still there, but they're in a different form. It's very different now. Like, how do I tell my mother about virtual girlfriends, virtual relationships? And this is something that she will never be able to comprehend. It's the same difficulty and Islamically the same sort of sin, but in a very different form. And so we can't just expect the same. If the only tool you have in your toolbox is a hammer, everything's going to look like a nail, and that's not always the case. And so that's where we need to be flexible, be innovative, and adapt our approach mechanisms and the availability. And so it's a difficult task, but it's one that we need to do. But it can be done. Like I said, if they adapted back then, we can adapt now. And again, I was fortunate. My father, again, had a huge interest in religion. I had access to books and things, that he was sort of a keen follower of the religion, and had a intellectual sort of interest within the religion, and not just about fulfilling the obligations, but also wanting to learn more. He was a sort of big follower of the sort of the spiritual path of Islam, and had huge sort of interest in books about the religion, about figures in Islam, and about historical figures, and we had access to that. And so, he'd never actively sat down and taught us those things, but we could see him as having that interest, and that kind of piqued our interest. Like, what is that? Why is that? And that again, later on in my life, played a huge role, because when I became more interested in religion, the first thing I turned to was the books that my dad had. And so that really shaped my life going forward. And so, I was fortunate. I know not everybody has those availabilities, but I think, again, as sort of now the elders of the community, we need to just make sure that our methods, our engagement mechanisms are in the same spaces as where the youth are. again, we can't approach it as we were approached 20 years ago. So I'm talking 25, 30 years ago now. The world's moved so far forward now. If I try to use the same techniques that my mentor scholar used, that's not going to work. I need to understand his sort of approach to it, maintain those ethics and those morals, but innovate in terms of the engagement and the approach.
Great. I think there's a couple of points that you mentioned. I think the one thing that really stands out is not just having this routine connection with the religion, but actually an intellectual curiosity and pursuit of that through books and through access to the imams and listening and watching things that are related to this to fulfill your intellectual curiosity, especially for the creator and the creation and the rules and the guidelines and the values and the ethics and everything that the guidelines that the Sharia provides. So the Quran and Sunnah of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the books related to that, their lives of Sahabas, and how they implemented it in their time. So rules are constant.
Yes.
Their implementation, like the hammer has evolved.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, some of us with lesser intellectual curiosity, they still try to use the same hammer in 2024.
Yeah.
The shape of the hammer has changed a bit. So, and there are certain other tools that need to be used now in addition to the hammer. Yes, there is a space for that as well, but not in the same shape exactly as it was. So the rules remain the same, but the principles remain the same. The practices evolve.
Slightly different, yeah.
Right? Is it within the guidelines, and those guidelines will be uh, provided as a uh, as safeguarded choices of those practices with your imams. We can't just reinvent, redefine, or innovate without that guide. Yes, and I can see that tendency growing in the community and in the society quite a lot. Where say I'm self-taught,
Yes, yeah, 100%.
I am self-implementing, and I'm making self-understood choices without the guidelines also 100%. And I don't even know those guardrails, and I'm saying yes, according to my understanding, this is how it is. This is how we should implement. And that has caused such a chaos and confusion in people's lives and the implementation of and then is the religion in their lives, and confuses other people as well, and creates a big mess in the overall core values. So it confuses the next generation much more than we were. We had very few, and we could see, does it look right? Okay, move on. Here, everything is like, oh my God, what's happening? So how do you control that? How do you manage that now?
It's a very difficult one, and I agree with that. Educated idiots. Unfortunately, that's what we call them. And again, I think it's born out of not having those principles and morals installed from a young age, where you feel it's your right just because you have excelled in a certain subjects. So, for instance, if I am very good at chemistry, that does not mean I can pick up the Quran, the Hadith, and all of the books of jurisprudence and self-interpret based on somebody else's translation. That's it's as sort of crazy as me saying, no, I'm gonna now self-medicate because I can read 5 books in chemistry, so I must be able to read things on pharmaceuticals and we see that. I think this is a common trend beyond just the religion. We see a lot of things in, again, medicine, people coming out with some crazy sort of lifestyles around how they self-medicate and self-study about certain illnesses and sort of then the medication that cures those illnesses. We're talking about spiritual illnesses on this side, and it's the same thing. It's if you don't have a background in studying those principles, those understanding where the guardrails are and what the do's and the don'ts, and where the flexibility is and where the flexibility isn't.
Is it? Yes.
You can't go and study it yourself. And I think that's something, again, that is a new, unique problem to this generation now. And I really feel for the youngsters, because obviously, like you said, we didn't have that. We had very set sort of ways. That despite however your imam was, that he went through a rigorous educational process to be where he is. Pakistan madrasa system, they went through Dars Nizami 7 years, 12 years, and if they did Dar al Iftar, then they went 15 years, 20 years. But my imam, who I mentioned, he studied for 22 years of his life. Throughout and very sort of famous seminaries across Pakistan, in Azad Kashmir, then in Rawalpindi, and he studied with some of the great scholars of his generation. And so, it was easy for me to rely on him. But like you said, in this day and age where you have people, new podcasts, new YouTube channels popping up every day, and people trying to then teach the religion without have any grounding in the religion, it is a very, very difficult situation. But I think that's where the responsibility comes upon the parents and then the elders of the communities to make sure they again are available, have the resources available, have that access available, have that accessibility for the youth to understand that, look, this is where we need to gain our religion from. Make sure you are in those spaces. So if podcasts is what is the space now that gets these, make sure you're there. Make sure you are presenting the right information within those spaces. Make sure you have that accessibility where the youth know that they can, when they need to have a question about, be it direct religion or be it a societal issue that has connection to the religion, those things that they know where we should be going. And again, I would sort of implore my elders and my peers is have that flexibility in your approaches, have that flexibility in terms of your understanding. Don't judge. Like I said, I think the one issue that we really have is a lot of our religious leaders who have come from places like Pakistan, otherwise, come with some cultural baggage, and by cultural baggage I mean things that um, society sort of struggles with in Pakistan, backbiting, this sort of hierarchical system of sort of caste and these sort of things, and what that can sometimes happen is they're not the best people, and they're not the best secret keepers, and they're not the best, they sort of judge things because they come from those sort of backgrounds. So we need to kind of step up in those areas, but we need to adapt within the spaces that the religion allows us to adapt. Again, teaching mechanisms, the approach, and study. The elders need to study the new problems. You need to study artificial intelligence. You need to study blockchain. You need to study this whole concept of virtual relationships and these virtual spaces. You need to study these online gambling spaces to then be able to put content out so people know that you understand this. You can't expect somebody to bring their problem to you. You need to be able to. So there's problems that we can see in terms of society and community. We know that gambling's an issue. Gambling's no longer physical casinos; it's online.
No.
We know relationships are not always physical now; they're now online. We know that again, pornography, addictions, all these things, these are all online, virtual. If we don't have an understanding of them, artificial intelligence, there is so many things that really skew the boundaries of the Sharia in artificial intelligence. Like in like just a simple question in Sharia, who's liable then if you get some advice, right? So I do it sometimes. I sometimes get I seek legal advice from my chatbots and things like that I've trained. But in the Sharia, who's then liable for those things? If you go to a mufti, you go to imam, that person is liable for the judgment they give to you. But what happens in this situation? And so our scholars need to be there. They need to get there before they are forced to be there. So learn about those things, get your studies within those spaces up to speed, and provide the guidelines for it. I remember there was a young, not so young now, but a very influential scholar who I used to sort of follow from Birmingham, Mufti Munawwar Atiq Sahab, based out of I think it's Dudley in Birmingham, who was one of the first people to give a fatwa on the use of mobile phones in Salah. So if your mobile rings while you're praying, what the ethics are around that, and what is allowed and what's not allowed. And for a long time of my life, I didn't know what to do. If the phone was ringing, panicking, like I've been very tired. What should I do? And he was the first to really he gave an edict on it. Say, look, if it's just vibrating, if it's distracting, then you're allowed to move one hand away and try to silence it without too much movement. And I was like, okay, that now my salah won't break. Yeah, it won't break. And obviously the idea is to try to silent it before you go, but sometimes you're in a hurry. But it's that relief now, and that sort of comfort now to know, okay, the religion has the space for this now. So if it does happen, I don't need to stand there and continue praying and let the whole congregation get disturbed with a ringtone from that. Or I don't need to sort of panic, and it's not going to break my namaz, and I don't need to start the prayer again. it's these sort of things, and but these things need to come. I know. For instance, Mufti Taqi Osmani Sahab have done something on sort of the new sort of financial systems globally and fantastically well. But again, I think that's more reactionary rather than proactiveness. And I think we need more proactiveness. We need more people to come in, speak about artificial intelligence, speak about blockchain, speak about these things. You know, the whole concept of blockchain and how that works in light of the Sharia's financial systems. It needs work. It needs bright minds. It needs people to go into this and not leave it to opportunists, which is, I think, what we can call these individuals who self-study and put things out there. And so, yeah, it's about being proactive. And so we need our elders to be proactive.
Your previous point, I just remembered a few experiences I had. So in those old days when we had Nokias and other phones which were very loud,
Yes.
small but very, very loud, and making them silent, you had to press the button for a while before it goes up. So I would go in to these jamaat in the salah, and inevitably the phone starts ringing, right? So it was so loud that I couldn't understand whether it's mine or next one. Right? So I would always be worried that if mine ring, what would happen? And your point about, because initially I didn't know what were the rulings, I felt that I was in this connection with Allah, with my hands like here, and I'm fully focused on my salah, and I make any movement and my salah will break. My limited wrong knowledge. And the phone rings, and now my salah is ruined. Everybody else's is ruined as well, and Imam can hear it as well. It's not a big place, and I'm just, in my mind, I have no connection with my salah anymore at all. I'm just, my ears are getting red. It's like anxiety is like, Baskar, if somebody is calling, they would keep on redialing, right? And ultimately, I'll pretend that nothing is happening. Just quickly press the button, hoping that the right button will press. Now it's very easy, right? With the smartphones, you press the volume button while it's ringing, it just goes mute. And if somebody's trying you more than twice, then it won't ring at all. Then you can set the settings up, right? And things like that. But this kind of guidance, many people still struggle with. I'm so surprised. In the salah, phone is ringing continuously. Everybody is ruined. I can't hear my mom's tilawat and everything. And this guy is also struggling, but he's saying, like, I can't do anything.
Let it ring,
Let it ring. Assuming that everything will be fine. So it's just a story from my past. I felt that, like, I wish that I had access to those ulama and shayukh who would actually guide me. And the good thing now is the new generation imams, especially even the masjid across the road, they announce it on a regular basis.
Oh, fantastic.
Saying, please turn your phones off. So now my routine is I leave my phone in the glove box in my car. I don't even take it inside because I don't need it. I know I don't need it. And if there is an emergency, is Allah's will, I will come back in 10 minutes. Inshallah, should be fine. Right? So they announce it that, okay, turn it on. They have these posters, they have all these things and reminders. And if somebody's phone rings, they finish the salah normally. And instead of reprimanding us, like, oh, what did you do? They would say, the ruling is that this 3-second rule, so that in the time that you can say 3 times subhanallah, you can just figure out. And it's not that you can take this off and just open it up and insta seva is and I've seen that happen multiple times as well. So there is a fine line to that. We can't read, and those who are defining it on their own without their intellectual curiosity, without reading up, without consulting, without taking mashwara, they are making those mistakes and their salah is broken. It's such a, imagine their farz is broken and they're not worried. And then because of that ignorance. So that point about reaching to those who know, taking those guidelines from them, understanding the boundaries of those and the interpretation of those in the previous times and the translation of those into the current times. I think that requires a conversation with the learned, and then you read up, you discuss, and you take the guidance, and then you follow the guidance. If there is something not allowed, that's not allowed.
Not allowed.
Just accept it. Because I feel that this current generation and the upcoming generation, they're not really accepting of this. This is not allowed. They're like, I'll push that. I'll try it.
But I think it's identity. Again, it's identity crisis. I think what happens is people are fearful of owning Islam as being their space, and they feel this external influence of. And it's a bit strange because I'll be honest with you. I think we're becoming very polar now. Where before there was a lot of moderation, and there was a lot of sort of now it's either you are very openly Muslim, or you are very sort of hidden away sort of Muslim. And I think, we need to, as sort of community leaders, and sort of the imams and the masjids and the madrasas and these people, we need to, I think, be more vocal, be a bit more, take ownership of their communities, and allow them to feel safe, and give them safe spaces to identify with Islam and understand it. And I think it comes through teachings. Like my background, if I didn't go through the life journey that I did, I wouldn't be where I am. My father instilled a real intellectual curiosity within me around the religion. I found an imam who satiated that interest. I could go to him with 101 questions, and he would answer every single one of them. And then I found a journey after that. I'm a proponent of the spiritual side of Islam. I follow tasawwuf, and I have a keen interest in it. And I grew up having a really keen interest in poetry, and be it Arabic poetry and Urdu poetry in particular. I then, through again parents' du'as, had access to probably some of the most influential people in Islamic sort of uh, education and intellectualism in Pakistan, and here in the UK. I sought them out, and I found sort of guidance from them. I got to attach myself with them closely. And throughout the rest of my journey, I had this real, again, curiosity around understanding Allah, and the Quran and the Sunnah for its real sort of life implementation, and that sort of practicalities of these things. And that, again, it was born through that foundation that was set. And so, you know, I know not everybody gets that, but I think where the youth don't get it from home, then there should be community spaces that they can sort of that those sort
Tap
of
into, yes.
yeah those sort of values can be sort of passed on to them. But again, I think it needs beyond just the little sort of delving into these issues. It needs our educational institutes, our big madrasas, the big sort of voices and thought leaders in this space, to go beyond just the periphery on this, and delve into the real nuts and bolts of these new issues. I was reading a debate recently around AI, and the whole concept of, you don't get punished for a thought that you have. You get punished or you get a sin
When you
allocated when you enter. But what if you're talking to yourself on AI? So who are you talking to? And what if you share something that isn't right with that? Like the whole sort of, oh everyone always, yeah. And so, but these are things like, so
yes,
you have these people who have created virtual girlfriends.
yes,
So there's no sentient being there. You're talking to a computer. So it's just it's something that needs to be defined, and it can only be defined by scholars. They need to go into the deep mechanics of it, and say, okay, what is this? What is an AI chatbot? Like, what are these things, and what are and obviously some things are very black and white. Okay, but some things they kind of quite confusing after a while. You know, sharing of sort of sins. We say, you shouldn't share your sins with people. If you've done a sin, that's between you and Allah. Okay, if you go to a a, a religious authority to go and seek guidance, that's different. What if you're sharing your sins with a AI chatbot?
yes,
Like, there are so many things. There is like complexities to this,
yes.
and they're not going to get resolved until our scholars, the real scholars who have studied the religion for 10, 15 years and continue to study it, they don't dive into this um, together. It's not an individual thing. They need to do it together. There needs to be new guidelines. There needs to be a new set of sort of Islamic legislation on these ideas. If you come from India, Pakistan, you know about the whole issue of the speaker system, and how it was, first it was mandated as being haram, and
Yes.
any salah and namaz read using a microphone was not accepted. But that had to adapt. That changed. You had the research going to it. You had the leading sort of madrasas and schooling systems went into it deeper. The scholars went into it deeper, and then gave the relevant adjustments to it. It's the same with this. It can't be reactionary. You can't just go in and say, "Oh, that's haram." That's it. You need to go into it deeper. You need to go into it. We're moving into a system. We're a cashless society now. The whole Islamic financial system is based off of gold and physical trading of things. How, like, if you haven't adapted those things now, how can we get true guidance from them? And so you need to have thought leaders in this space. You need to have these people. And I think before we even go to the youth, I think as elders, we first need to get those people together, get working groups on AI, get working groups on blockchain, get working groups on and then have a coherent approach to it. And then be able to say to the youth, look, guys, these things, these are the guidelines for these things. And make those apparent, get them disseminate out there, get them out into those spaces, and not leave it up to the opportunists, to the chancellors, to these other guys. So it's a lot of work. It's not an easy thing, but it has to be done. And if we don't take the initiative on it, then we're not going to be done.
Excellent. Okay, so we delved quite deep into quite a lot of experiences and your views on how we can nurture this next generation and how the environment is shaping us and how we can contribute to shaping it up as a safer environment for our generation to nurture and to fulfill their purpose. The roles that imams can play, the elders can play, our generation needs to play, the intellectual curiosity, the will to accept the guidelines and the boundaries while maintaining the focus on those principles and adapting the practices while staying in consultation with those who know. So that's all great. I think we'll move on to the second part, which is mainly around your the way you manage your health. So we know there are certain things that you can share easily and others you can't. Perfectly fine. That's not an issue, up to you. But we generally break it down. The framework that we use is on the 4 sets of self. So it's the soul set, how you manage your spirituality, the mindset, how you manage your learning how to learn, and techniques, tips, and things. And then the heart set, how you manage emotions, and the health set, how you manage your health physically from a diet and from a physical being perspective. But I'll do that as a rapid fire. So what I'll do is, okay, I'll say soul set. How do you manage the soul set? And then you can give us your few sentences on description, and then you say, okay, what are the 3 tips you will give to manage or nurture your soul set? And then we'll keep on moving, right? If there is a point that you want to go deeper, that's fine, we can go.
Sure.
But I want to make sure that we cover those 4.
Yeah,
sure. Okay, let's go ahead. So, okay, soul set. How do you manage soul set?
Zikr Azkar, so meditation. So loosely defined as meditation. I'm very much a big proponent of that, beyond just prayer, ghor tafakkur. So looking back on your day-to-day activity and how you have spent your day and how you can improve your day, these sort of things I think are the, we say in Urdu, khurak of the soul. So they are the feed for the soul, and so that's how I sort of maintain that. And there's a lot of background, how I got there, but that's a very sort of short answer to that.
Great. So tips and techniques to maintain a routine of doing this.
I think before routine, I think really delve into your relationship with Allah. So one thing that really helped me was going beyond just the fear of Allah to understanding the love Allah has for us. So loving Allah becomes later on in the journey. I think first, if you can try to delve into how much your Lord loves you, that is just sort of a step through the door into that whole understanding the soul's relationship with Allah, and how you could then incorporate and get closer to Allah. Because I think the way this works and routine works is you only get into routine when you have a goal in mind. So if you have a goal that you want to get closer to your Lord, then you can set a routine. But until you don't identify that goal, and that goal only comes from understanding Allah. So, okay, what is Allah for me? Is it just somebody I need to fear? If I don't read the namaz, I'm going to get punished. If I don't do this, I'm going to get punished. The punishment of the grave. And sometimes from the Indian subcontinent, we focus too much on these things.
Yes.
If you don't do this, you're going to do this. If you don't do this, this is going to happen to you. And that instills a bit of resentment into people's hearts. They don't get that relationship. Whereas if you're to go towards the love of Allah, Allah loves you 70 times more than your mother. And the adad of 70, the number of 70 is not it's not to say 70. If you were to study the Arabic sort of sciences and language, the number 7 is to do with abundance. It's not to do with a specific number. So whenever 7 is sort of mentioned within the religious and spiritual sciences, it's not specifically 7. What 7 means is an abundance. So when you say 70, doesn't mean 70 mothers. It means an abundance of mothers. So I love you more than, and so these sort of things. So when you get into these sort of spaces, then only then you can start to set up a routine. And then it's just simple, just setting 10 minutes aside a day. If you're not reading your 5 prayers, maybe I identify one prayer, say which one is the most easiest for you to do, and start there and just commit to that, and then build out your routine like that. But try to find a goal, a purpose in it.
purpose. Beautiful. So just reminded me of something that really stuck to my heart. One of our scholars, we were having this leadership excellence course. There was a retreat by Mr. Jawad, a big scholar from India. And we went to South Africa with him as well. We brought him here in the UK, and there was around 100 plus people in that retreat. So about 5-day residential kind of thing. And one thing he would remind us would be, we would always ask this question of what is taqwa and what is tawakkul. And many people would say, oh yeah, taqwa is fear of Allah. And you would say, do you like the police? Do you love the police?
Yes, exactly. Yes.
And no.
Oh, yeah, great example.
Yes, they are helpful. They are protecting you.
Yeah.
But taqwa is much beyond fear. It's actually a fear of displeasing Allah.
Yes. Yeah.
Because we love Him so much that we are fearful that we will hurt
Yes.
the relationship by not following His orders.
Yeah.
And initially it was like, yeah, too philosophical. Then you gradually realize,
Yes. What that means.
wow, it's like exactly what you're saying. If we focus on love, how much Allah loves us, and all the guardrails that He's provided us, the rules and the protection, everything is for our benefit. Even Salah is for our benefit.
Yes.
Everything is there to benefit us physically, mentally, spiritually, and every way, right? And then we say, no, we'll reinvent the wheel. And we say, oh, we fear Him, and we're just doing it because we have to do it. If you have to do it, you don't really love doing it. Yes, you should still do it.
Yes.
Even if you are doing it with fear, please keep doing it,
Yes.
right?
Yeah, 100%.
But the point is, you need to be on this continuous improvement journey. When we incrementally gain more knowledge and experience this practice without even knowing sometimes, you get to a point where you realize, I'm doing it not because of the fear, but because of His love. And His love is infinite. And this is one of the visible symptoms of that love, that I am given this opportunity to pray.
Yes.
Right?
100%.
And it's a completely different paradigm shift, right?
Yeah.
And it took me about 10 years, I would say, to get to that point at least. And we still struggle. It keeps on going up and down, right? But this thought process of fear versus love, that is very close to my heart. So thanks for that. So from zikr perspective, any routines that you say, okay, so let's say somebody recognizes that Allah loves us much more than anybody else, right? So doing zikr based on that feeling, what routines would you recommend?
Again, I would consult a scholar. Again, we just spoke in the first segment about people advising where they're not suited to be advised. But so simple. There's so many things in the hadith and the Quran and things that you can take lessons from. So a simple one that I to be honest benefited hugely from was in one of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's hadith about sins and sort of asking for forgiveness from Allah. The tasbih of subhanallahi wa bihamdihi subhanallahil azim. And whoever reads it 100 times, even if his sins were of the foam of the ocean, they'll be. And just taking 5-10 minutes out, and I benefit from doing early morning. You know, everybody has their times. You have your circadian cycles, and for me, it's either deep in the night, that solitude and that connection, or it's very early in the morning. During the day, it's very hard. I'll be honest. Even for me, during the day, I don't get that connection again. But I just sitting there and focusing on the meaning of what you're reading and what you're reading, and just doing, and not going. I think what sometimes people do is they try to run before they can walk. Yeah. Oh, we're going to do this, and that's and I've done that in my life as well. And what happens is you have that motivation for maybe a week, 10 days, and then you fall flat on your face. Start small and start. I think one of the scholars that I again was very close to in my life. I used to try to read, a significant amount of Quran every day. In Islam it's separated into 30 sparas. I said one spara. And he said to me, look, is it not better that you read one ruku, one line with translation and with interpretation, and you benefit from that one rather than trying to read 30 pages a day without benefiting from the understanding of the notes. And to be honest, when I implemented that, it just again completely changed my life. Is small but practical and implementable steps. And so again with the zikr, choose something that has a good grounding. It could be anything. Again, I'm not gonna prescribe anything for anybody, but it's you find and just stick to it, learn it, and then develop a connection with it. Many things again in the hadith about what to read after prayers, what to read here. There's so many things you could do. Simple one is even just prayer. Just trying to find that connection, the khushu and khudu within your salah, these sort of things. And so, but yeah, but what I have really seen benefit me is just taking that extra 10 minutes somewhere. And I would really go back on the tafakkur side of things. And for those, who don't quite understand that, that's about sort of, let's say a review, a self-review of your time. So like you do in your job space where you have your annual quarterly review.
Yes.
This is almost like a daily review
Okay.
of you and your life. And there's many aqwal and many sayings of the Sahaba and others of what that is worth in terms of your ibadah and your worship. But it's just about sitting and wondering how you spent your day and what you can do to take practical steps to get closer to Allah, get slightly better in your religion, slightly better in your charity, and so many things. And I think if you start somewhere there, it could be 5 minutes. It could be 5 minutes. But honestly, I saw a huge impact on my life when I started to implement things like that. And really sort of beyond just the career and always focusing, how about me as a person? So what am I doing today? What have I done today? What could I do in my relationship with my children, relationship with my mother, my siblings, my neighbor, my community? Like, what did I do today? What could I do tomorrow that could sort of slightly better? And if you do that, incremental change leads to the big changes. If you try to do big changes first, it's always, 9 times out of 10, you're going to fail. But if you do incremental and do it constantly, you're going to see in 6 months' time, you're going to look back and you'll be like, wow, 6 months, I've achieved a lot. And so that's what sort of my advice on that one.
Yeah. So small but consistent. Yes, that's the key. I think our scholars they always advise us to keep things simple. And one of the techniques they taught us early in our journey was that they asked us to focus on letting something go from your life, like get rid of a sin that you're doing consistently to make some space to do good and replace it. Because if you already have a glass that's full, and you whatever your routine is 24 hours a day, you're trying to add, you come across a good lecture or guidance or whatever and say, yeah, that's a good thing, I should do it, right? And you try to force it onto it, it won't happen because it's going to overspill. They say letting go of a bad habit is much more important than starting a new one, because getting rid of a bad habit is already a good habit. Right? So that was like, so you don't want me to do all of the good things that you told me. You just want me to reflect on my life, like the fakr thing. And it's always talking about, okay, what is the one small thing that I can remove from a life that is not of value, till I'm wasting time or social media or whatever I'm doing that's not adding value. How can I get rid of it? And you actually try with the concerted effort to actually get rid of it. Yes, consistently. And as you create some space, it's like a barren land. If you don't fill it up with something good, weeds will grow. Yes. Right? Same with your habits. If you don't replace your bad habit with a good one, the bad will be replaced with another bad one. Yeah, that's it. So we have to be very cautious of this. And hence, having a mentor or a spiritual guide with you who knows you, understands your context, and knows a lot more about you than most other people, they can guide you and nudge you into shape much better than others. Yes. Because this YouTube, even religious guidance and knowledge, some wonderful knowledge available on YouTube, but then they don't know your context yet. Yeah. A shape would know your context. Yes. And they will give you a contextual answer based on your maturity level as well. The answers on YouTube are generic. Yes. They might be wrong thing for you right now. You're running before walking, right?
An easy example on that is, again, is we sometimes treat our spiritual and soul ailments as different to our physical ones. Physically, you wouldn't engage with an online doctor. You'd want to go to your local doctor, because your local doctor knows your medical
GP, right? So family doctor.
Yeah, he knows your medical history. He knows your parents' medical history. I've had some health issues, and they go through a plethora of questions about, okay, do you have any issues? Your parents have this issue, this issue, this issue, and only then can they correctly prescribe something or recommend something that will improve your health. It's very similar in this space. When you have spiritual ailments, and spiritual ailments means if you're constantly sinning, you're affecting your soul. You can't quit cold turkey. That's not how it works. You can't just say, today I'm going to stop drinking, and you stop drinking. You need to have guidance of somebody who knows you well, who knows your habits, or who knows your, we say, temperament, tabiat, well, and they can guide you in accordance to that. And that might not be the same as somebody who lives next to you or your brother. It might be very different to your own sibling. That's the importance of having that connection of somebody, accessibility to somebody. And so I 100% agree with you. It's you need to try to find somebody who understands you, who knows you, who can prescribe accordingly to that, and address your problems accordingly. And it's an issue, accessibility. And again, I agree with you with the whole YouTube sort of era that we live in now. It is unfortunate because, again, a number of wonderful resources, but I think too much accessibility to things that are above and beyond your understanding and comprehension level can also misguide. And so if you're, again, trying to run before you walk, you don't quite know basics of, let's say, Arabic language, the sarf, the nahv, the mantiq, the balagha, all these things, and you try diving into major philosophical issues, and you're watching debates, and this is the big thing nowadays, is debates. Yes. And the comical nature of these, and I honestly, I have huge amounts of resentment and anger towards these YouTube figures who have gone down this path purely for views engagement. It's just for views, and you have distorted the religion. You have caused such misguidance, and surely Allah, you won't be answerable to Allah to all of this, but it's caused a new phenomenon in our religion now, where you have the youth that have no other interest in religion other than for debates, and that taking the gang culture of warfare that into this, and it's such a honestly, it's a very disheartening thing to see. But again, we need to get more good into those spaces, try to allow those things to be sort of diluted out. But it's a difficult one. But until you don't replace it, it's gonna be a difficult one. So you have to either give that availability and accessibility in local, and allow people to know where to come and where to be, to try to get the right sort of guidance, or make sure that you're flooding the online content with enough good that you can try to again
balance it. Balance it out. Okay. So we'll conclude this first point, soul set. What are the 3 tips for soul set?
I would say tafakkar, number 1. So taking a bit of time out to review yourself and review your progress daily basis, your soul. So what's going, and what you said was perfect. If you have small bad habits, reviewing them and identifying where you can take those out. 2, finding a routine of, again, zikr, azkar, meditation sort of, and I say meditation because that's the big sort of buzzword that they use nowadays. But it is that. It's trying to find something where once you have identified bad habits, then try to replace those bad habits with good habits. And zikr comes in so many different forms. It doesn't mean you sit there with a tasbih and it can come in so many different forms.
Okay.
And then 3rd is finding a guide, like I said, somebody who you can go and share the elements of your soul, the problems and the illnesses of the soul with. And again, that's not an easy thing to do, because again, I won't say ever to blindly rely on just your local person, because there's a lot of misguidance, there's a lot of very nefarious and unfortunately not very nice characters out there who come in the guise of religion. But it's maybe taking a step to try to maybe go to those sort of Islamic circles, trying to find the person you connect most with, and do your research into him. In a hadith, it talks about you don't really know somebody truly until you've either done a money dealing with them or you've traveled with them.
Yes.
And with me, I am fortunate enough with the people who I rely on for my religious advice. I've done a lot of travel with them, and so I've seen them. And so, but I know not everybody has that access, but maybe you can find somebody who has.
Yes.
And so that's what so those 3 points.
Great. Wonderful. Okay. Moving to the next one, mindset.
Yes.
How do you learn? So share some tips on learning how to learn and managing your mind and grasping huge concepts and complexities, the big pieces of information, and making sense out of them in the shortest possible time.
I'm probably the worst person ever to ask on this. I am very much synchronized madness type of person. Like, if you ever come and see my desk, you're gonna be like, "Whoa, what is going on here?" It's see, I again, I've always been very career and goal focused, and so the way I've learned, I don't have like when I mentioned about my degree and going for my degree only purely for its end goal. I'm very similar to that. So how I got into, for instance, the smart cities concept and how I kind of set up my consultancy and then ended up, alhamdulillah, doing very well within that space. Now, I came from a background of, I did some industrial project management in my industrial placement, and then I ended up finding a role in a consultancy based in London doing placemaking. So it's around town and city centers and how we can shape the town and city centers, and then saw a huge gap because of all the archaic methodologies that are being used to, invest tens and hundreds of millions of pounds into town and city centers from the local authority side. And I saw a gap in the market. And I saw how technology could come in and could really sort of um, influence that space, and did a bit of research around it, found this concept, smart cities, which was very early back then. Not a lot of content around it, but I dived into it as if like it was my life and death sort of thing. And I day and night immerse myself in that. And I know that's not for everybody. And so I have a very sort of goals based learning method. And like I said,
So dig deeper. When you say I studied a lot, I researched a lot on it, take us through the process. I know you said it's
Yeah.
chaotic, but
quite literally
be
finding
something that-
anything and everything that was available on the topic at the time.
so reading and watching.
Yeah, reading. Watching wasn't. So this is back in 2014, 15.
Okay.
There wasn't a lot of content in terms of videos. There was more literature,
Mhm.
and that literature was very much academic literature. Because again, it wasn't into real practical implementation. There was some things in smart cities, the early 2010s, but it wasn't sort of known as the concept that it was when I started to delve into it. And so then went out and sought out. There was a event that used to take place in Barcelona every year on the topic. So I flew out to there, really immersed myself into the subject matter, and went and sought out the industry leaders at the time. So go and speak to the guys who are known in that space. Go and engage with them, see who they are, what they are, how they are approaching this, and how you can then find your space in it. And again, it's very much career sort of focus. And so that's kind of how I've done a lot of my learning throughout my life. Maybe a slightly better example is probably how I've approached the learning within Islamic sort of sciences, and how I've wanted to build out a sort of a better grounding within the religion. Is that was very much sort of like basis of what I wanted to do is understand, trying to find a topic that I really enjoy, and then trying to kind of, again, seek out the right people within that space, and see who they are, what they are, and take time out to try to learn. But again, learning is, there's no shortcut to learning. What I've learned, there's always a a want from anybody side to try to gain a huge amount of knowledge in a small amount of time, but it can't be done without hard work. You have to put in the hours. It cannot be done without hours. It cannot be done. I'm a traditionalist. I very much believe in sitting with your mentors, sitting with your teachers, and being there physically. Islamic knowledge. 99% of what I've gained at feet of my teachers, and I try to do that as much as possible. Even in my career-wise learning, I try to be out in the space as much as I can, practically being with people, having these types of conversations with people, much better than the online, and sort of the online. There's always that barrier, hesitancy. You can't have that sort of conversational flow, or that learning, practical learning that you would have in a sort of physical environment. But a great book on this topic, Atomic Habits. I learned a lot of really good things from that book. At a time where I think my learning had hit a bit of a plateau, where I was kind of struggling to take on new things, because I was overloading myself with too much in one time. And so that book did a lot of good for me in terms of shoring up my habits. And it's very much about your setting your goal first and working from outside in rather than inside out. And so it was a really interesting book to read, and to kind of learn from. But like I said, on the learning side, I'm probably gonna be one of the worst people you can approach on that. So I think less said on it, the better.
That's good. No, but the good thing is you mentioned that whenever you want to learn about a topic, you will read about it. You will go to the experts in that field. You try to spend some time with them to read their content and then discuss it with them. And do you learn by discussion or by taking notes? And do you take notes? And if you do, how do you take them? Tell us a little bit more about that.
But both ways.
Okay.
So, for instance, since the last year and a half, I've delved into the mining sector, so critical minerals. So it was a completely new sector for myself, or something that I had very limited knowledge on prior to engaging with it. But I was approached by government to say, look, this is a really urgent need of ours. Can you, because of your connectivity? And so then I took a period of about 6 months where I went into it really deep. Again,
Really?
yeah, it was very much similar to how I did it with smart cities, trying to understand it from a conceptual basis, a theoretical basis, and then a practical basis. So, and then trying to find my space within that. So I'm not the academic side. I'm not going to be doing research and understanding research on sort of use cases for vanadium and titanium and these sort of things. And again, theoretical, I was much more the practical side. And then it was about going out, sitting with people, listening to them speak, taking notes on how they've achieved what they've achieved, how, any sort of key learning points from them, and then having conversations with them around practicalities. So, okay, how did you go from A, B, C, or 1, 2 to 3? Now, how did you get to your end goal? How did you get to where you are now? Project basis, sort of long-term life goal basis, ambition, these sort of things. And so I'm very in sort of I love sort of asking questions. I'm very intuitive like that. So I like to poke people for their knowledge and then sort of absorb that as much as I can and take from it what I can and implement it into my own sort of practical life as much as I can as well.
Okay. So from a practical tip perspective, I learned, I recognized my learning preferences quite late in my career. So all my schooling and my university days, I didn't know what my
Yes.
memorizing understanding mechanism was. Till I reached England, I got through I was in Xerox, then they put me in a training program called mind mapping.
Okay.
Tony Bazan, right? And I was like, I went in and they showed me those mind maps and those lines. I was like, this is exactly how my mind works. And just instantly, I was like, why have I been taking linear notes? They're a waste of time for me because my mindset is more visual.
Yes.
And I need to structure. So from a distance, it just looks like kidam got it. But I know exactly where each and every word is right now.
Yes.
All the things that you've said, I can summarize most of them through this map.
Yeah.
I haven't taken any notes, but these are mental notes tied to my visual on the paper.
Yeah.
So this mind map is a lifesaver for me, and it has accelerated my learning by at least 5 times.
Mm-hmm.
So I used to spend a lot of time in learning, hardworking, as I mentioned earlier, right? So I would study 12, 14, 15, 16 hours. Now I do much less, but I achieve much more.
Yeah.
It's not that I've become smarter, it's just managing my learning.
Yes.
So is there anything that along those
Very much similar to you. I'm very visual.
Visual.
I need to see relationships. So there was an app I used to use. I haven't used it for a few years now, but there was the mind mapping app. It was a note taking app that whilst you made notes in it, you created sort of links and tabs. So you sort of made the sort of like tags with it, and then what it did in the background was it created a relationship map for you.
Oh wow.
That you could then click on and see the relationships between the multiple things that you've taken notes on. They didn't develop it as much as I wanted it to go, so I used it very early on, and then I had to step away and start doing it sort of very much like you. But I have to see the relationship. So my business partner at the moment, she's phenomenal in how she visualizes concepts, and it's almost a bit dictatorial with her, is where I sit and I speak and she maps it, and then only when she maps it then I see it. Okay, yes, wow, brilliant. And we do this on a regular basis. So every maybe 2 or 3 days we have a meeting, and she has her the big marker pens and the A3 papers, and we do it. We go through it and we do this. And I'm very much like you. I am okay. Until I don't write something down, I don't remember it. And better than writing it is understanding the relationship of what that piece of content means for me and what it needs to lead on to. So, for instance, the way I would, and again, very much work-wise, is if I have a particular project, let's say Pakistan, we map Pakistan. I'll map all of the sort of related um, subjects around Pakistan, and then it's about, okay, the relationships between all of those sub subjects, and then the sub subjects, and then how you can go that, and then we have that. I have that as a sort of reference point. Okay, when it comes to Pakistan, these are the layers I need to understand. These are the practical implementations. Here's the potential barriers, and you kind of have that as a sort of note taking, but very much like you. So when I see that, I see um what do you call it, coherent madness, and so it's
It's just
and so
I like that.
yeah, and so it's yeah.
Okay, wonderful. That's great. Thank you. So what you just shared is an amazing technique. If you yourself are a certain type of thinker, and you structure your thoughts and learning in a certain way, you might need somebody else to complement
Yeah.
those thought processes in a way that it becomes 1 plus 1 equals 11.
Yes, yeah.
And so you have your partner who enables you to be yourself
Yes.
without expecting you to collate everything
Yeah.
in a 100%
Yeah.
beautified document,
Mhm.
a linear textual document.
Yeah.
You would say, okay, let's structure the thought process. Because you have done your research, you have those in your mind, let's map it up, put it on paper, and then it's much easier for you to go back and then write the document as well. But writing it from the scratch
Yeah.
could take
Yep.
much longer.
Yes, 100%.
So that's where the synergies come in, yeah. And that's why we need different type of personalities in the team.
Yes,
They
100%.
complement each other. Wonderful. Okay, let's come on to the heart set. Imagine managing emotions, anxiety, anger, depression, whatever, all sorts of things that happen around us, with us.
Mhm.
How do you manage that?
Tawakkal is purely my grounding, and again, no sort of not out of my own doing, but out of my experiences and viewing of. So early on, my father was a pillar. The world around him could be sort of collapsing, and he would have incredible regulation of his emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, not in the traditional sense where, oh, the typical man, not showing, not like that. He would always express his emotions, but only in front of Allah. So I would see him sometimes on his masala crying. That's the only times I would ever see him crying. So
And would that be a normal salah or the
no,
tahajjud?
like yeah, late night sort of. He wouldn't do it in front of us. It wasn't. It's like one of those things where you kind of, yeah, you come across, like I would maybe wake up when I'm going to the toilet, and those sort of things. And he taught me very early on. He did, my imam did, and then the spiritual sort of guide who I attached myself in later on in life did, was to always embed within me that there's always an outlet in front of Allah. So to let yourself sort of go. You should never be reserved in front of Allah, and that sometimes we burden ourselves too much, sort of hiding things away, especially as men. Um, that's your space. And there's a beautiful saying that well, again, one of the guides I've spent a lot of time with said to me was that tears are the ornaments of the eye. So they are the ronak of the eyes, right? So if you don't have tears, you don't your eyes are almost sort of worthless, and so you should. And there's a whole sort of concept in Islam around tears, and the engagement of tears with sort of your relationship with Allah, and forgiveness, and these sort of things. And so I was lucky to have this very early on. So I sort of had that. And so with these individuals, yeah, my father through the 1989, 1990 recession lost two houses, and we ended up going from owning two private houses to then moving into a council house.
Oh my God.
And not just a council house, we moved into a council house in one of the most remote areas, which was constantly under attack by racist
Oh my God.
tribal community at the time. And I saw my dad through that whole thing, and how he was, and how he regulated himself, and both him and my mother, how they managed themselves, and how they, you know, it was just incredible to watch them go through that and those two hardships. My father then had a number of physical health problems, a triple bypass, which then 6 months later, sort of collapsed, and he ended up having another heart attack, and he had constant sort of heart surgeries. Yet till the day he passed last year, physically you could never tell that he had anything wrong.
Really?
He was very independent,
Wow.
doing everything himself. Very much like my ustad, so my imam, who went to the hospital no less than 100 times, or engaged with the NHS no less than 100 times over the course of 10 months, um, through a problem that he had in terms of his lungs and coughing, and was kept was constantly told that, look, nothing to worry about until September, where he's told that he's got cancer, stage 4 cancer, and he passes away 10 days later. But despite that, I went to see him in the hospital, and even then, it's just like, Jawad, it's the qadr. It's qadr of Allah. This is what Allah has ordained for me. Me as a person, all I can do is practically do what I can. The Prophet Muhammad told us to seek treatments. I came to doctors constantly to seek what I could do from my side. I did, and the rest is in Allah's hands. And so, and again, it leads back to the soul. Um, that whole routine of having that space where meditation, that hold and tafakkar, these are things that regulate emotions. If I was to tell you, I lost my father, I lost my mentor within the last 11 months. So it's been probably the hardest year of my life, and a real test for me in terms of I lost my father in December of last year, and then I went completely reliant on my mentor because he was my mentor anyway, but it was just then he was there as my father as well, and then to lose him 8-9 months later, it was really. And so the regulation on the emotion side was, again, not being hard on myself to say, look, you're a man, you don't show emotions, this is this. Understanding your responsibilities, understanding that, look, emotions are a healthy part of life. The ups, the downs, the happiness, the sadness, the depression. Ayame huzun. If you read about the Prophet Muhammad and the time that he had when his uncle passed away, his wife passed away, these are very natural human emotions. I think one thing that we get way too much caught up in now is fallen knows ka hal nikalna, just straight away trying to get a solution to it. No, something. If you lose your mother, you lose your father. That's a very grief-stricken time, and it's not one that you get over instantly. And I think even sometimes in the religious spaces, there's, I think, a bit of misguidance in this space. Oh, 3 days and then shut up and move on with your life. And that's not how things work in practical life. 3 days, you re-enter your physical, your sort of practical life, but you don't lose that connection with that individual who's gone. And you need to give yourself space. Give yourself space. And I think this over-reliance now, and again, I'm going to say this with a big disclaimer because I know it's a medical issue, it's nothing, but I think over-reliance on these sort of prescriptive drugs and these sort of things have caused issues. And again, no sort of slight on anybody who's using things, because everybody has different sort of coping mechanisms, but I think we've become way too much into this lifestyle where we need immediate remedies to our problems, and that's not how emotions work.
So instant gratification and instant remedies.
That's not how it works. That's not how your body functions. Things can happen in your body that need weeks and months to clear. It's just not one of those things. A fantastic example that I recently learned of, or a few years back, which really helped me regulate my long-term emotions about sort of attachment. So I used to always think, the religion is very sort of strict in terms of if someone passes away 3 days and then move on with your life. And then I read about the story of the Prophet ﷺ and Washi bin Harb, and when he came to accept Islam on the hand of the Prophet ﷺ after Fatah Makkah. And the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, despite it being years after Sayyidina Amir Hamza had passed, asked the questions.
Yes.
How did you kill him? And then cried. And then also said to Washi bin Harb that, look, don't, I've accepted your Islam, Allah, but don't come in front of me because that it affects me.
Yes, yeah.
And that showed me that, look, Islam is not devoid of emotion. You have but you need to always be connected to your creator. Know that is the long-term thing. Everyone has to go. Everyone's going to go. But those relationships, those emotions, they are human. If the best of creation, the Prophet ﷺ, had those emotions, went through those emotions, who are we?
Yes.
And so that really helped me in terms of my understanding of these things. And so, again, maybe, it's going to be like a broken record here, but it's always back to religion. Until you don't have that grounding in religion, and this is why I've seen, in terms of, I've been fortunate enough in my career where I've engaged with what we would classify as the corridors of power here in the UK. And it's been very scary at times, because seeing the sort of coping mechanisms that people away from religion have, it's really frightful at times. But then there's also a huge resurgence of religion and spirituality within those circles. People
Really?
coming towards religion, be it Islam, be it Christianity, be it Buddhism, because Buddhism is getting a huge following. Why? Because of that inner sort of emptiness. People are trying to find, oh, look, this is this is not life. These are not the solutions. The antidepressants. That's not what it is. But there's something missing there.
There's something was definitely.
And us as Muslims, that for us it's the religion, and a lot of these people. That's why we see a lot of non-Muslims coming towards Islam is for that sort of internal peace. And so if we as people who are born in the religion, and we need to have that relationship. And so my emotional regulator has always been religion,
Wonderful.
and I try to. But saying that, weekdays are very common, and so don't ever beat yourself up about having weekdays. I've had days where I've not wanted to get out of my bed, not wanting to speak to anybody, being very upset, very thingy. That's just like that. That's normal. That's not something to beat yourself up over. You can have very weak days. You can have very strong days. It's about understanding that this a fantastic example I'll give you again, and one that really, really helped me. My guide out of Pakistan, fantastic individual. I'll share the name with you later on, but he was here in the UK, and I spent a lot of time with him. And during that time, we went. He over a period of 3 months that he was in the UK, we probably went 3 times to Alton Towers. And this is an individual who spent. It was about 45, close to 50 years old at the time. He's probably spent 20, 25 years of his life in madrasas, educational institutes, and he was born into a very religious family and very well respected in all sort of circles of life. And here he is going to Alton Towers to go on roller coasters all the time. And just me and him, there was a very sort of ajib sort of situation for me. But out of respect, he nice to go with him. And one day we're standing in line for the Smile roller coaster in Alton Towers, which is like the biggest one. And I was like, look, I refer to him as Hazard. Hazard, like, I'm at a loss. I don't understand this. Like, what is this? Like, why are you here? And you come with me yourself because there's a lot of things in it. And he said, look, you know what, Jawad? I'll explain to you. Is when you sit into this roller coaster and they tie you in, so you're locked in, you're only going to get out at the end, right? So all of those ups and downs, the lefts, the rights, the throwing up and down, it's entirely up to you how you react to them. You can scream, you can shout, you can cry, you can laugh.
It's beautiful.
You could do what you want, but you're not getting out until. This is what life is. When your soul is into your body,
Beautiful.
your soul's not going to come out until death. It's then entirely up to you how you spend the rest of that time. If you're going to cry, you're going to shout, you're going to scream, you're going to laugh, you're going to be happy. Whatever you do, again, the exit point is the exit point. And honestly, this was back in 2014, 15, I think, when I was going through some real hardship in my own life. It just completely changed my mindset. And now when I have a trial or tribulation in my life, it's going to come. I lost my father. There was nothing I could do to stop my father from going. There was nothing. So then it's up to me on how I react on that and allow myself to feel that grief, allow myself to have those emotions because they are very human to have, but then also understand that, look, now, you need to get back into your practical life, and it's in your own hands. You can manage these. And so that was a fantastic example that somebody gave to me, and I'd love to sort of pass on.
Beautiful. I'm sure anybody who will listen to this is the one point that really hones it in on be human and accept the constraints, and instead of screaming, shouting, crying, laughing out loud, you can do that as well. Irrespective of that, there is a starting point, and then we came to this world, and there will be an end point, and the end point is only controlled by the one who created us.
That's it.
Nice. Beautiful. Okay, excellent. Coming to the health set.
Yes.
How do you manage your health, dietary, and
Not very well at all, though. So I will share with you. So I'm a type 1 diabetic.
okay?
And it's a very, very severe illness, and one that is 24/7, 7 days a week. I've been a type 1 diabetic now for 14 years of my life.
14 years.
And came at a time where was completely unexpected. Nothing could sort of alert me to it. It was a period of 10 days I felt unwell. On the 11th day, I was in hospital on multiple sort of drips and about to enter a coma because I was about to go into DKA. And I was told that, your pancreas is no longer producing a certain type of cell, and now you're going to be on insulin injections for the rest of your life. And that completely flipped my life. 180 degrees. So I had a grounding in religion. Parents are very good. Mentor was very good. The imam. Then life catches up with you. You get on. I studied A level, went into university. I went to live out university, and you know religion probably wasn't the number one priority for me at the time. Enjoying my life,
As
friends, family, loads of things. And then I got a kick up the rear. I got a real kick where this happened, and it was one of the hardest times of my life, probably the hardest time, other than sort of maybe the last year, where again life goes on without you, friends, and everything moves on. Everyone has their own life, and I was there, being told by doctors that I'm on the verge of going into a coma. They might have to shut down my body. I'm now on minimum of 3 to 4 injections per day, every day for the rest of my life, plus constantly pricking my fingers, checking my blood sugar levels and X, Y, Z. I came out from hospital and I was very much like, no, I'm not going to let this beat me. I'm going to carry on my life. That didn't work. About 2 weeks later, I sort of again collapsed because I can't continue my life. This thing is not going to let me continue my life. And then I was sort of summoned in by the doctors. They were like, oh, your liver's really swelled. We think you might even have cancer as well. Another time I was living in Birmingham, I was doing fantastically well. I was in university. I was also running a business which was doing very well. I was earning, for the time, a lot of sort of money and living very comfortably. And I had this nice apartment in the center of Birmingham. And I just recall having this conversation with the doctors, coming home, and we had a balcony. I was just sitting on the balcony, and it's maybe 2, 3 in the morning, and I'm just there, and I'm just so confused as to what life is doing with me. Like I didn't know. I just decided from there that I need to pray, and I pray, and then I read Fajr.
good that the thought of the prayer came at that time. Because imagine
Yes,
sitting at a balcony in that situation.
and honestly, I don't know. Allah's karam for me. I can never say that was me or anything like that. I was just purely parents.
Other people will think of jumping.
Yes, parents' du'as, and I probably did have some of those thoughts and things, but I don't know why I went to the practical side, and it's that day to now that alhamdulillah I've not missed my prayers, and so it's very practical. But I can't say I look after my health in the sense of I there's things I have to do practically in order to maintain my health. I have sensors on my arms. But um, without sort of praising myself, I think it's the fact that I'm still okay in that sense. I think is enough for me. Like I can't get too much into too much into these things. Like just the practical implications of living with this is
Accept the constraints.
yeah,
And make the most out of
yeah,
the.
make the most of it. And that's what it is. And so I can't ever give any sort of health advice or anything otherwise to people. Obviously, exercise and all these things have fantastic effects on your life, on your mind, on your soul, all of these things. So physical health is so important to your mental and spiritual health. If you're not physically healthy, you're not going to be mentally healthy.
Yep.
And these things. But I can't.
No, that's good. And diet perspective, apart from the constraints, any certain routine that you follow, anything that you eat specifically to maintain health?
No. So I try to limit carbs, obviously, because of my sort of limitations because of my health. But otherwise, no. I'm a big foodie. I love food in the sense of I love eating. Not that I eat a lot of food, but I just love eating nice food, like different multiple sort of or various cuisines and these sort of things. And so I love bless my mother. She's a very good cook, and so she does lots of various things. And so yeah, but again, this is probably one area I can't give any sort of advice or guidance or anything else.
Thank you very much for being so open and transparent about it. Thank you very much. So, okay, so we are now into this exciting segment of how you're making this world a better place. So the purpose of the Purpose Cast is to highlight those individuals and businesses and professionals and consultancy services who really care for the planet or the people, or both, adding value to them, not harming them, helping them flourish, survive, thrive, all the good things. And interestingly, you mentioned quite a lot of things about the critical minerals and the related things, where these are the things that we need to have a safer, sustainable future. And those minerals are about 22 of them you mentioned.
Yeah, it depends on
There's scarcity of that. So there is conservation of that, there is availability of those, and then utilization of those in various industries. That's fascinating. From smart cities perspective, again, managing emissions, I'm sure there will be so many environmental, social and governance or anything to do with ESG. Tell us big picture first. How is this industry? What kind of initiatives are there for the future? What's happening right now? And how can businesses benefit from your services?
Sure. A very interesting one. I think we could do a whole podcast on this on its own. Only because again, to speak practically, I think I'm not many people are gonna like what I say.
Okay.
But I've never allowed that to affect what I say
Mhm.
in the long term. So ESG is a major in what it is in the form that it is at the moment is a major fad. Yeah, it's not a. It's a again. I'm trying to be very diplomatic in the wording that I use, only because there may be people who see this, and it's very much a way of the developed world to enforce impractical things on the developing world.
Yeah.
So you have the developed world that built itself on entirely dirty and unsustainable processes, and it's an absolute lie to say that these things were not known at the time that these things were utilized to build their sort of or to develop themselves and build their superiority. To now say to everybody in the developing world, "Oh no, you can't do what we did. You have to do things that are much more expensive, much less practical, and much less in terms of deliverable." And it's just a huge consultancy game around people just paying other people lots of money to guide them to things that is just so impractical, and sometimes I honestly laughable when I see who is paying how much for what, and how these things work, things like carbon credits and all of these things. And um, but they managed to build a huge industry, and an industry that is worth multiple hundreds of billions globally, and it is what it is. And so what we do, what I've tried to do is where we can actually make a practical um, difference is try to kind of re-get in this. Obviously, critical minerals, you touched on them. They are a group of minerals that are um, scarce in terms of their availability, are situated around the world in majority sort of underdeveloped developing countries, and these are basically the building blocks to our future, and not just our future, our current. So, you know, there's a incredible sort of metric around things like the use of like copper, lithium, and other sort of critical minerals, and the comparison between a traditional coal plant where you'd use anywhere between 4,000 tons of these metals and minerals to build like a 1 gigawatt coal plant, whereas the same um, output of sort of energy like a 1 gigawatt solar plant or a wind farm would use 12,000 tons of the same metals
Wow.
and minerals. So a factor of three. So in order to get towards a sustainable future, as it is being pushed by a lot of the sort of developing world, you first need to go in and be very unsustainable on the ground in the developing world by continuing to dig it up, displacing communities, affecting indigenous communities, exploiting these countries for their resources, and then doing it at a price that continues to allow sustainability to be a practical solution. And so there is so many things to this when you actually dig into the actual practicalities of it, where there is a deep, dark, and quite dirty world where ESG is fantastic when you're sitting in the corporate offices in London, but when you're down in a lithium mine or a cobalt mine in the Democratic Republic of Congo, and you got child labor and bonded labor and a whole host of other horrible, unethical practices taking place. And taking place, why? Because the off-taker who then needs that cobalt to go into the batteries needs it at a set price.
Yes.
Then all of those ESG conversations kind of go out the window. But there are, and that's not dismissing everybody. There are some very, very good practical players in the space doing some really good things and trying to do really good things. But just in general, I think I think China, India, and a couple other sort of emerging superpowers have taken a hard line on this now, where they're kind of saying to the developed world that, look, guys, unfortunately, we have goals in terms of taking people out of poverty, making sure that people are, and we can't achieve these things by implementing what you guys are trying to impose on us, and that's why we're seeing a big shift away from some of these things. Even here in the UK, the ambitions we set around decarbonization, we're not going to fulfill them. They were unrealistic. And if you are a close follower of what the energy industry and situation here in the UK is at the moment, you understand that we are in such a deep, sort of dangerous situation here in the UK around our energy security, and we have the most costly energy in all of Europe. And there's just so many things that point towards the impracticality of this sort of hardline push towards ESG. But what we are doing, so in practical in terms of what myself, what my new consultancy Richmond Global are doing, is around, look, critical minerals are needed. They're going to be mined regardless of what's happening in the world, because they are needed for your electric vehicles. They are needed for your day-to-day devices, your mobile phones, all of these things, beyond just the sustainability element of it. So can we take a practical step in helping some of those countries and their governments understand how they can prevent themselves from being exploited, build a better business case for themselves, whilst also, allowing sort of the access to these big entities from sort of developing world, but trying to get a better deal for the sort of the communities on the grounds where these minerals are being extracted from. And then also trying to tie that up with, I think one thing that we have working in our favor is there is a huge amount of money that was allocated to ESG that has no deployable projects, because practical projects can't actually work with some of the constraints of ESG money. And so what we're trying to do is say, okay, can we adjust mining projects enough to be able to be then accessible or have access to that type of money? And so that's sort of space we're working in at the moment.
So you're advising those who are in the mining industry,
Yes.
who are trying to be sustainable and environmentally sustainable within the ESG guidelines, but because of the practicality, they are struggling to still go for mining, but within the constraints, tap into the funding that is available to get it done.
Yeah.
And your expertise is in helping them find those solutions in their context.
Yeah, we are. And to be honest, at the moment, we're seeing that there needs to be more flexibility on the ESG side than from this side. Because again, there is practical implementations. You want to the very cool and sort of crux basis of this is you need to go and dig deep into the ground, the earth, to extract an element out of the ground. Doesn't matter how you reword that. In its very core, it's a unsustainable non ESG thing, right? It's everything against ESG. So you need to go into displaced communities. You need to dig deep and disturb ecological, environmental ecosystems. I need to extract something out of the ground that's been there for billions of years, not knowing what the long-term impact is going to be on
For that imbalance that you're creating.
crazy. So in its core, in its very essence, it's anti ESG. So then trying to match the two is a really difficult task. And so we're having to see that a lot of governments now are having to step away from ESG, really, in terms of for this element. And you're going to see much more come out over the course of the next 12 to 18 months around this, where a lot of governments are going to turn almost a blind eye to the majority of ESG criteria when it comes to critical minerals. Just yesterday, and very relevant, there's more export controls being brought in by China on certain minerals, because they control like 99% of a lot of the critical minerals
Really?
globally. Yeah, so they
99%.
of certain minerals. So there's certain critical minerals where China practically own 99% of the supply chain. So they
So when you say supply chain, it's extracted somewhere else, but they won't.
process. They're the only people who process it. So, for instance, anti-money, which is an element that goes into the semiconductor industry. So there's a certain type of semiconductor that uses anti-money, and there's other sort of use cases for it. That's almost 100% China. There's a very small, maybe 0.5% that is done in the US.
So the contracts of the mining of those, irrespective of wherever they are, especially more probably in Africa.
Africa, yeah.
Africa. So China already went in.
Yep.
And they had those agreements for centuries.
Yeah.
For
decades. Yeah.
Right. And now they are extracting it. They have been extracting it,
Yeah.
and they are selling it to the rest of the world.
Yep.
But majority of the critical minerals are owned by 99% of them, and that's owned by China.
Chinese. So
And that means production of these lithium-ion batteries becomes a problem.
big problem.
Silicon production through using the antimony,
Yeah.
and many others.
Yep.
So China is in the controlling state right
Yeah,
now,
100.
and they're bringing more and more regulations
Yep.
to reduce the export of these things
Yep.
because they are growing their own industry.
Yeah, but the domestic demand is so high, and also trade wars. So like the US put in 100% import tax on EVs out of China,
Yeah.
and so they say, okay, you can do that to us, but then we're going to make your EVs even more expensive by making it more difficult for you to access the minerals.
The way the UK is doing right for BYD, right?
Yes.
So they are saying,
And so this is trade war, and I don't know why the UK. Unfortunately, the UK is just a again, I say this very
carefully.
unfortunately, it's just a victim of association. So we're having to do this because of our association with the US, our alignment with the US. There is no practical advantage or anything we gain from these things that we've done. Look at Huawei and what they've done, especially with the launch of their new operator, their own OS, and everything they've done now, and how they are set up to absolutely destroy Apple and everyone else.
They just launched the car as well.
Yeah, they're doing everything. They've got the entire ecosystem, and that was maybe done 10 years earlier because of the banning of US.
So the constraint forced them to do it at an accelerated pace.
The US arrested, I think, the CTO at the time.
Yes,
Banned all of their products, took all of their files, everything out. So they had to go back and they had the choice of either shutting up shop or just spending everything on R&D and then coming back with their own solutions to everything. And that's what they've done. They've come back and they've got their own solution to everything. They launched their operating system, I think last week, to huge success. Their phones now are doing things that the iPhone, I don't think, has planned for the next 5 years.
Oh my God.
Things like screen grabs, its engagement with your movements and all of these things. You know, I think the launch was end of last week, and everybody and anybody who was at that launch was just blown away by what Huawei have come out with in terms of their operating system. And so, you know, the UK is unfortunately shooting itself in its foot by, again, victim of association.
It's done that really well for the last 20 years.
Yeah,
It's just ruined everything.
And this is what it is. But yeah, so China, they have physical control over those supply chains.
Okay, so great. So your guidance is available for those who need that and to alleviate that constraint.
Yeah.
And also tapping into these ESG grants. Were there or are they?
No, so no grants. So it's practically funding. So there's a lot of ESG funding that sits here in London.
What does that mean, funding?
So this is money that sort of like institutional funds have got together, raised through private investors, and it sits anywhere between 50 to about 150 billion pounds of money that's just sitting unallocated here in the UK, being London being a finance centre where they don't have projects to put this money into. So
because of the constraints,
not just mining, just in general, there is no lack of money in the world. There's a lack of investable projects when it comes to ESG.
It's strange.
It's strange. I mean, it's strange to people who don't understand it, but it's because ESG is very impractical. So the impracticalities of everything related to ESG just prevents a good pipeline of projects to be available. And again, you are expecting this pipeline of projects to become available in the developing world to a standard of the developed world, which doesn't
make sense. Yes, because
And
it's
so
an evolutionary process. It's incremental. They started from completely non-environmentally friendly practices. They gradually improved them. Yes, you don't want to ruin the globe, but to get to where we are, we have been through.
That's what it is. And there's so much. So there's two things we do. So ESG is one part of what we do. ESG sort of helping even governments understand how they could become a bit more ESG so compliant for their sort of mining. But we do a lot of on the ground practical work. Again, mining is going to happen regardless of what anybody does in terms of that. So what we try to do is we try to get a better deal for the guys on the ground. So for instance, and that's not always ESG compliant. So I would never like position myself as a pure ESG. That's not what we do. That's part of what we do. So if you want to access ESG money here in the UK, what practical implications can you do? Practical sort of steps can you take to then access that money, be it as a private mining company or as a government that's looking to bring investment in. But beyond that, away from ESG, there's lots of money that's going to be flowing in. There's a lot of exploitation and things that are going to happen on the ground, which we try to prevent in the sense that we try to broker better deals for governments on the ground. So a couple of governments, I can't mention on this, but there's a few African governments we're working with actively at the moment where we're helping the UK, US invest money into those spaces, but at a better deal than what they are traditionally used to from, say, the Chinese, the US, or other sort of existing mining sort of companies in the space. And so, so the idea is around trying to prevent things like child labor, bonded labor, these sort of things, making sure that there's practical constraints tied to some of the money that goes in. It doesn't have to be 100% ESG, but just better, and things around going above and beyond just the extraction, and allowing sort of value add to be included on the ground. And so we're doing something very similar in Pakistan, and so that's sort of the practical side of what we're trying to do.
Pakistan has so many minerals,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Atom critical as well.
Yes, geologically. So no proven reserves. That's lack of just sort of engagement from the government. They haven't put the money in, but geologically it's set up to have a lot of very um, considerate sort of deposits of some very critical minerals.
Oh.
So obviously the copper belt there has the Reko Dig project, which is now it's earmarked to become the biggest copper project in the world.
Oh, really?
Because of more reserves that have been found around it. Obviously, it's been 25 years, I think, since the project sort of initiated, and so it's been a long, very dirty 25 years. Lots of political, judicial issues with it. But otherwise, yeah, the country's set up. There's lithium deposits, there's vanadium deposits, there's antimony deposits that have been found that need further investment on, research on, to kind of get around the understanding the practical sort of it, the proper feasibilities. But yeah, it's set up ecologically. There's huge opportunity there.
So that region, seeing the way Pakistan has been struggling, it's been in a disaster mode for the last 2-3 years now, even worse, yes, than it was ever before, at least in what we have seen till now. Yes, lawlessness, corruption, and all sorts of things that have happened, and everybody has tried to benefit from the lawlessness in the best possible way.
Yeah.
Um, what would you recommend? What is this road to recovery?
It's a very hard and very difficult question to answer. And one again, I think I need to be very measured in terms of the words that I use. But I don't know. It's becoming very depressing and watching what's happening in Pakistan at the moment. I've always been a big believer in the country. I've invested very decent amounts of money. You know, I'm via an angel fund. We've invested into 11 businesses in Pakistan. I'm doing a lot in terms of the agri space in Pakistan, helping agricultural entities export some of their goods out of the country into new markets. But it's there needs to be a very large concerted effort from politics, the judiciary, the establishment to come together for a common goal that transgresses all sort of political divides, and something that needs to be done, because even this, in terms of critical minerals, there is a huge opportunity for Pakistan, but Pakistan cannot take advantage of that opportunity without getting its own ducks in order. Some of the investment that's needed into Pakistan to establish the mining sector, it's in the multiple billions, tens of billions. And that money doesn't come into places of lawlessness, of lack of control, of no sort of, like, if you look at just Reko Dig itself has probably put off so many potential investors because it's a project that's taken 25 years from when the initial project was announced to now um, practically getting things done, and you know, production's due to start in 2027, I feel. I believe. And so just looking at that, you know, that's not a very attractive thing to potential investors. Say, look, we're gonna invest 2, 3, 4 billion dollars into a country where we may not see any return on that for 25, 30 years. These things are not practical, and so until we don't sort these things out, we're not going to move away from being very small scale, um, unlawful, informal sort of artisanal mining to some of the bigger scale stuff that we need to really it could revolutionize Pakistan if it's done properly. some of the deposits that Pakistan potentially sits on, it could revolutionize the country. There is so much that we can benefit from, but it needs, again, concerted effort from across the board. So from the politics, from the judiciary, and from the security services to say, look, all differences aside, for this particular thing, let's kind of get together and let's bring in that
For a
investment and
greater
yeah,
good.
and do that.
Okay, it's good. But yeah, so it's good to see your view on this, and great to see that your services are very practical, and they are trying to make this world a better place. Yes, there are constraints being defined by the Western world onto this developing world, but those constraints are not really helpful. They're actually uh, creating more harm than benefit, and that ultimately somebody is going to pay the price,
Mm-hmm.
and it won't be the Western world.
Yep.
It's the current doing more, right?
That's what it is. Yeah.
So it's quite unethical from my perspective, just like CSRs, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, corporate social responsibility, big scam ultimately,
Yes.
because it was just a tick box of all the wrong things you used to do. And I say, yeah, well, I do this one good thing as well. See, and I'm going to do so much push on my social media presence marketing. That yeah, see, we are such ethical, great people. We have a great CSR program. Otherwise, we exploit everybody everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? So same with ESG, similar things at a much bigger level.
Mm-hmm.
Final words of advice from overall conversation we have had, to the parents, to mentors, to community, to teenagers, to self, to businessmen.
So to parents and to community leaders is innovate. You need to bring yourself up to speed with the problems of today, and don't be reactionary, be proactive, because the youth can very much go out of our hands if we take a sit back and reactionary sort of response to issues. um, some of these issues, even despite me living in this country my whole life, there's some issues that the current generations are going through, the younger generations, that I have no understanding of, despite being somebody who's very technology literate, and knows about trends and these things. There's still so many things I have no understanding of. And so there needs to be real practical steps taken by parents, by community leaders, to make sure they are well versed and have a deeper understanding of some of the issues and problems that the youth are going through, and making themselves available and the spaces available for the youth to come in and practically sort of speak and talk about this. For the youth, um, there's huge amounts of opportunity out there. Um, Finding your path doesn't need to happen now. You have so much space. I listen to Gary Vee a lot, the influencer and entrepreneur, and he always talks about how the age of 20 to 30 is just like a learning period. You do things, and I'm very much a believer of that. I don't think you need to burden yourself with responsibility very early on, but allow yourself to use your energies in good spaces to understand where your calling is, or where your real opportunity is. And allow yourself to immerse yourself in those different spaces. Don't align yourself with one thing and kind of board yourself up, and those sort of things. So, and always reach out to those people who you think, or you aspire to be like. People are always approachable. You just have to take that one step to go and approach them. And we have plenty around the St Albans, Watford, and surrounding areas of successful individuals, both on a personal level and on a professional level. I'm a huge advocate of LinkedIn, and I've used LinkedIn to my benefit massively. And I say this a lot to sort of youngsters who I engage with, is use LinkedIn to your benefit. Find people who you think, okay, in terms of career way, I really like that career journey that this individual took, and have the courage to drop them a message. What's the worst that can happen? They won't respond.
Yeah. Yeah.
But have that confidence within you to go about doing that. But for the Muslim youth in general, there is so many solutions to our day-to-day problems that can be found with a good connection and grounding with a religion. And again, it's easier said than done, but taking the practical steps to try to re-engage with your religion is a fantastic opportunity to really find yourself and help sort of improve yourself on a professional level too.
Okay, we were just in the concluding thoughts. Your amazing words of wisdom on youth and how we need to innovate and how we need to reach out to the shuyukh and the ulama, and using LinkedIn for professional connections. Um, and we were just wrapping up things. Any remaining thoughts that we want to capture here?
I think this might come out as slightly wrong again for the youth, but I think there is a role for the male elders in our communities to be more, I think, vocal and practical around. Um, Again, I need to be very careful about some of the words that we use for some reasons, but I think there's been a real loss in the understanding of sort of gender roles and gender specific sort of identity that is born out of our religion and things around masculinity and these sort of things which help with identification and ownership of culture and identity and these sort of things, which I think maybe our elders and us need to be a bit more vocal on, a bit more provide a safe space for the youth to come in and understand rather than be influenced from external sources and external sort of spaces. Because I think we struggled with identity crisis in terms of place, right? So when I was brought up here in the UK, a second generation immigrant, okay, am I Pakistani? Am I British? I think what the youth are going through now is like a million times increase in that it's not just identity around where they're from, it's identity around personal identification, gender identification, like so many things, relationship identification. There's so many things that they are being thrown from external sort of places and sources, which I can imagine are causing huge amounts of confusion and sort of are detrimental to their professional and personal development in their life. And so I think, again, I think the elders and the community leaders need to take a lot more practical sort of space and a role in this. And lack of a better word, I think individuals need to be a bit braver and man up a bit more to and take and shield maybe the youth from criticisms around certain things and be the practical leaders on this. I know it's done much more so up in the north of this country and much less so down south. I think it needs a few leaders of real spine and backbone to kind of step forward and say to the youth, look, guys, this is us, and we're here to protect you, and you guys own your identity and be who you are, and we're willing to whatever comes your way, we're willing to kind of shield you and protect you for that, because I think this is something that, again, the youth, there's so many issues for them to kind of face up to at the moment. So this is just one of those.
It's very, very deep words. Those who can understand, they'll get the message. Yeah, because if I reflect on what you just said, and I've experienced it myself firsthand, uh, there are very practicing families, elders, parents who did so well to manage and protect their own identity. The next generation also tried to follow the path, but then they were so influenced by the changes around, and the elders were so busy in their own circles and whatever, that the youth really didn't connect. So there was a generation gap. And then in that process, the pains of the past, of the challenges in the society and the culture in the past, the elders kept on solving those or working with those and keeping that lens, saying, oh, that used to be a problem, that must still be a problem. So we'll deep fix those. They didn't have any family issues. British family system was very strong
Yes.
when they came here.
That's
so
true.
30, 40 years ago. Now it's a nuclear system. There's nothing. Then it's actually, it's like, it's abnormal to be a good family, like integrated family, right? We talk about, so this is family, then there is social norms, then there is this identity crisis on gender and everything else, and then you're born in the wrong body, and all sorts of things that this generation is facing on daily basis, not just facing, but being bombarded with and influenced by every moment with the ads, TVs, social media, education, curriculum, everything. And this generation doesn't even know what they're going through. So that gap needs to reduce. That means elders need to play their role to be the wise elders who go out of their way to uh, challenge those policies, to work with the local institutions, and to make sure that the next generation feels protected, feels that psychology of safety. And also, there is no fight between groups here. We're not saying, oh, because you belong to that group and this identity and that, and this is, you are a problem. It's just agreeing to disagree agreeably.
Yes.
We need to reach that point.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we are not. It's not converging. It's actually diverging. The challenge that I've seen in that area is when we talk about identity, we talk about pure identity. And pure identity living in this secular capitalist world as a Muslim, it's nearly impossible. So there needs to be some kind of translation of how that principle relates to the practice. What are the guardrails that will protect us with our identity while we stay as servants of Allah? And the youth then decides what they want to do. One psychological challenge that I see in all of this is we talk about, so being a business transformation consultant myself, having transformed huge organizations and their huge transformation programs, be it digital, cultural, mainly cultural. We talk about enabling talent. We talk about nurturing talent, okay? Attracting, retaining, and nurturing top talent. How do you nurture top talent? How do you help them achieve their true potential or pursue their true potential? By letting them be in a psychological safe environment where they can be themselves. Where they can be themselves. This system doesn't allow Muslim generation to be themselves. Because their thoughts are being curtailed. They cannot think, they cannot do certain things, like those prevent programs and others. They were purely targeted towards other communities, and other smaller groups have done like crazy violations of all of this. Nothing happened. So this is like, okay, you say one word and now I'm going to call those services, and then the children and their parents and everybody else is like, everybody is feeling threatened by this. So living in this environment, I think I agree to what you said, the role of those elders and the mentors and the community leaders, plus engagement with this next generation, helping them understand, yes, we are living in these constraints, but there is fairness, there is justice, and we will pursue it. And some things might not appear appropriate right now, but there are amazingly rational non-Muslims in this country and across the globe who are all for humanity, all for human rights, all for the right reasons to protect the communities. Like the BAME community has come up so well, right? They were exploited, and they still are in some places, but they have come out very strong. And the policies are being changed to accommodate all of that. Unfortunately for us, we are still lost. So there needs to be a concerted effort. I think the people like you and the like-minded people who can get together and strategize in a way that gives hope to this next generation. Because otherwise, I've seen so many who just want to leave this country.
Yeah, and to be honest, I would be lying to you if I didn't say that was a serious process that I went through.
Really? Okay.
And not too distant past. And to be honest, again, I would still say that I'm still very seriously considering it now. I think one thing about life that I've learned is that you have to choose and pick your battles. You can't fight everything and everything. And I have shared a few things with you today. There's a lot of sort of battles within sort of my personal life and things that I also need to manage and kind of safeguard my children from certain things as much as I can possibly. And I know it may sound as if kind of running away from the problem, but it goes beyond just this topic. So again, I know we're together today to try to inspire and give an element of guidance to listeners and sort of the youth around our area. But on a very practical level, this country has become very impractical. And I don't speak just on a religious basis. That is obviously one main factor. But when you look at it on an economic basis, when you look at it on a societal basis, when you look at it on a number of different angles, on pretty much every metric, this country is failing and failing miserably. And so I've had the opportunity to work very close to very high levels of government, and have engaged with very um, sort of senior sort of decision making processes. And unfortunately, this country is on a steep and rapid decline, and has been for the last, I would say, about 6 7 years. The standard of living, I've been here for 34 years of my life, and so the standard of living has collapsed in this country. It's non-recognizable from what I remember the UK being, and why my father would have wanted to come here, and why others since my father come here, and since sort of I've grown up, have wanted to come here. They're all unrecognizable now. They're no longer existent. I shared with you my health problems. Just over the last 14 years, I've seen the collapse of the NHS,
Yeah.
beyond recognition again, where um, you know I would not discourage someone from thinking about moving away from this country. That's not something I would do. I think we have to be practical. Again, choose your battles. Some battles, um, some battles, again, the timing on them has to be correct. And what you don't want to do is, you don't want to sacrifice your family and your family institution. I understand for a longer term goal, but there needs to be a level of security, and there's a level of accountability that you have towards your own family, to make sure that you provide for them in the best way possible. And like I said, in the UK, it's becoming more and more impractical. And so on like I said, the number of fronts, the religion side, the way the Muslim identity is being ostracized, and being pushed to the side, and shown as being something alien, um, is making it more difficult. And so that just adds to the imbalance. So, you're fighting economic issues, you're fighting societal issues, you're fighting, health issues, judicial issues, policing issues. There's so many things already adding up. And then you throw into that mix that, look, you can't even be who you want to be in terms of identity. Again, it becomes a very, very difficult place to convince yourself. And I know it's not practical for everybody to move, but I wouldn't discourage it. And that may not be the thing that you want to hear, or that others want to hear, but it's not. I would lie if I said I haven't seriously considered it myself. I think probably the only thing that tied me down in this country was parents, and the fact that I didn't want to uproot them in their elderly age, and move them away. Otherwise, myself, I see a brighter future for my children away from this country. Um, and again, both on a religious basis, but also on the practical career and professional basis as well. I see, I think the educational institutions here are not what they used to be. My children are in infant school, and it's unrecognizable in terms of the standard of teaching here now. It's not what it used to be. And so, yeah, on a number of levels, I have to be honest, it's not, I wouldn't discourage it.
I, on that point, and just as one small interjection to this, there has been a lot of noise about quiet quitting.
Hmm.
So when you stay on a job and do enough, so that you're not fired, but you're just taking by, right? You're getting your paycheck.
Yeah.
That's it. You're not performing. You're not really pursuing excellence. Nothing.
Mhm.
Right? It's just doing a
Yeah,
job.
that's what it is.
Uh, Teachers are there
Yeah,
right
doing
now.
that.
They have quite quitted.
Yeah.
Because so much burden was put on them,
Yeah.
because of all these silly regulations around them, that they became clerks.
Mhm.
They had to capture all this information as clerks, instead of putting those moments of inspiration in
Yes,
children.
yeah.
They are wasting most of their time in the useless stuff.
Yeah.
And ultimately, as this is a very noble profession, and it has gone down the drains.
Yes.
Um, City like St. Albans is known for its high quality schools, institutions. Yes, there are some excellent schools. Yes, there are excellent teachers, and they are enduring with that pain, but that won't last for too long.
Yeah, they're anomalies. It's not the norm anymore.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not the norm. And like I said, there's been a burden, a lack of investment into education, and so we're seeing I can speak on this quite considerably now. This move away from the STEM subjects towards much more art focused, and
Yeah.
obviously that has its space, but I just think that we are setting ourselves up to fail. If you look at, again, speaking just on a professional level, if you look at all of the big companies across the world at the moment, it's all Asian professionals who are leading top execs, CEOs.
Microsoft,
Obviously the Indians are overrepresented in that, but also there's Pakistanis, there's Asian, South Korean, and if you look at their education systems, of course, they have a very strong focus on the STEM subjects and teaching. Okay, maybe we may disagree with the sort of methodology of how they teach, but there is no doubting the success rate that they have, and we're seeing an increasing number of our um, people that have gone through our educational system now not have a ceiling. They have a ceiling that's very much lower down in these organizations. And we're at a time now we need to sit down and really look at that and think, okay, what are the future sort of implications of this? Like if my daughter's about to be 6 years old, I need to make a decision fairly soon to set her on a path that sets her up for her future. You know, these things, it's not to be left to later. So do I sit here now and think, okay, we're at this situation now, where are we gonna be in 10 years' time? Are we gonna be better or be for worse? So if I put her, am I doing her justice by staying here and putting her through an education system that I can see is failing? So it's only, in my eyes, it's only gonna get worse before it gets any better. So am I failing her as a father by forcefully pushing her through that education system and then reducing her outcomes and opportunities at the end of that education? Or am I doing her a favor by taking away from her and putting her into an institution where I think, okay, this will significantly increase her opportunities and chances of success in later in life? And success, I don't measure success by sort of monetary gain or anything, but I just think in terms of general shaping and modeling for your practical life going forward, and that can be everything to do with your personal life and your professional life. That's where you get your tarbiyat in school. That's where you get your training. That's where you find yourself as a person. And if that institution itself is failing you, me as a parent, I'm answerable to that. And so I need to put all of these things in on that scale on when I'm thinking about, okay, is it a battle that I'm ready to fight, but potentially sacrifice my children's future for? Or am I thinking, okay, this is too big an issue for me, and I think it's time for us to step away? And so these are, and, as a parent, like I said, I'm my children are very young. My son's even younger than my daughter. These are serious considerations for me. I need to really think about whether that is something I want to put them through. Is it worth it? Are there enough benefits to be gained from it, or do the negatives outweigh it now? Where I say, okay, you know what, I need to take them away from here.
Okay, excellent. That brings us to the end of the conversation, but I have a question.
Sure.
Looking at your experience and your strategic view of things,
Yeah.
and understanding of policy and the engagement at those top levels, I have a few initiatives that I'll mention. I'll summarize and then take your advice on where should I take them. What should be the route? Should we record this or not?
Entirely up to you. I'm happy to kind of try to talk.
So, for example, the first one is being an executive coach. So life coach and an executive coach. So I've done a lot in that. I don't market it much. People use those services without really highlighting it, and I don't talk about it because it's a very personal thing. Yeah. Executive advisory, I've done a lot for these large organizations. That's to do with helping executives lead their teams well. So my expertise is generally in business transformation. So business agility, anything to do with continuous improvement culture, and developing a culture of emotional intelligence.
Okay.
So I've got frameworks in that. My partner, who is the founder of Team Emotional Intelligence, Dr. Wolf, he's in Boston. So we extended our previous frameworks and we have developed some new ones like Inspired Teams and others, where we assess a team of leaders or an organization as a whole, startups or scale-ups, whatever. We assess them through scientific surveys. We benchmark them to the global high-performing teams, 3,000 of them.
Okay.
And then based on the data, we create a transformation map for them, for their team, and their teams, developing their team's emotional intelligence.
Wow.
Inspiring them to fix one thing at a time And we have that expertise in providing them with this consulting and training programs, the trainer, coach the coach programs as well, where we assess you anonymously. We pick up those pain points, agree, align those with your business objectives. Then we come up with the transformation plan, and 3 months only. So in 3 months, we're going to fix at least one thing. We'll attempt 3 with you. So we agree that these are the 3 pain points we're going to address. There are 16 norms that we have in our framework, so we only pick 3 with you. We bring them in, we define the roadmap, we do training programs, coaching programs, consulting program to a select few, like a pilot program. And the deadline is that within 3 months, we are going to move the needle positively. So in 3 months' time, when we do a reassessment, things would have improved. If they don't, full refund. Right? Money back guarantee. And alhamdulillah, I've never had to do it because we always produce much more than we promise. Right? So when we go through these training consulting programs, the teams go through this journey of redefining themselves, unlearning a few things, relearning a few things. Such services are quite rare. Okay. Yes, there are big consultancies who do it, but they do it because they have access to those clients and they are just doing it as almost like a tick box.
Yeah,
We do it for the passion. Like we really believe in unlocking people's potential. I know it's a cliche kind of the statement, but we really do, and we have seen those results. So having worked with very large organizations, generally, very few startups could afford us previously. So, but now we are saying, okay, we'll bring the pricing down for those startups who can pay in kind of thing.
Yeah.
Right. So we can do something along those lines, working with the leaders and those startup founders, scale up founders as well. So those, in a nutshell, training programs, coaching programs, consulting programs, developing internal talent, developing change catalysts, helping them lead their own transformation themselves so that they don't need us anymore. They can benchmark, assess through our framework if they want. If they want to do something else, that's perfectly fine. But they need to be on this continuous improvement journey where they pursue a purpose and they are aligned on their vision and they pursue excellence along the way. What would you suggest for such a business to survive and thrive in the Middle East right now? Because we have some Middle East experience as well, and in this Western world.
Practically, I think Middle East is a huge opportunity, only because there is real ambition in the Middle East to do things on a global scale. And you have a lot of organizations and entities out in the Middle East that value these services beyond sort of their internal value in terms of improving your own internal working mechanisms and your work sort of environment, and how that can practically lead on to better outcomes in an external situation. So here in the UK, we are very much in survival mode. So one of the reasons why, for instance, I run my smart cities consultancy. It goes beyond smart cities. So what Some Global does is we work with tech companies that want to build new products and products for like the smart city space. So we advise them on what they can do within that space to make their sort of tech more practically sort of deliverable. We work with local authorities to help them understand what tech they can use. Then in general, we do business advisory. So I help businesses go international. And we help them break into new markets, be able to understand, and we help them source sort of funding where needed. What we've seen over the last 3 years is the UK has gone into real retraction, where you generally had businesses who had certain amounts of their budget set aside for these sort of plans, for these sort of exercises, for these sort of growth initiatives. That's all shrunk now, where you have a limited amount of businesses that have the, let's say, excess budgets to be able to put towards something like this. They're very much in survival. You see the huge numbers of job losses that are taking place across both the North America, so US, and here in the UK. You know, businesses are very much survival, penny pinching. It's where can we save money? You know, what you guys are doing has immense importance, but it's not a sort of easily recognizable importance, where if you were to say to someone, look, if you were to improve the emotional intelligence and the sort of the growth sort of your personal sort of your employer skill sets and all these, it can lead to X, Y, and Z. A lot of businesses here in the UK are not in that position to be able to consider that at the moment, where they need real practical solutions now. If you look at the financial metrics, the number of borrowing, the number of defaults on loans, on business loans, and these sort of things. Unfortunately, that's even why our consultancy, so my Some Global one, is now completely international. Really, I have an office in Islamabad, we have an office in Multan, we have a presence in the UAE, where we are just working almost solidly with entities out of South Asia and Mid East now, where growth is almost non-existent here in the UK. Which again, like on a practical business level, it's become very difficult now. And so I would say definitely keep that in mind. You will get the odd, obviously, larger entities that have the ability and the budget to be able to implement something like this, but that's not sort of the norm here at the moment. At the moment, again, we're in very much retraction and very much survival mode, where businesses are trying to penny pinch, trying to cut costs, and exercises like this are traditionally not seen as sort of
Business critical.
yeah, pretty critical. That's the whereas in the Middle East, there's a very different approach to these sort of activities, where again, a lot of caveats to come in on this, but there is almost a sense of we have to prove ourselves to the rest of the world.
Yes.
In that psychology that's coming out of the Middle East, and so you see that a lot of the organizations, they are much more practically um, going towards these sort of exercises and these sort of processes to then prove themselves to the rest of the world that, look, guys, we have fantastic um, ecosystems within our working ecosystem, the employee benefits, growth plans, ESG. All of these things are finding much faster adoptability across the Middle East and parts of South Asia than they are here in the UK and North Europe. Again, we are on our knees when it comes to certain elements of our economy, the energy crisis. Not just here, you look at Germany, you look at a lot of Northern Europe. And so that's what it is. So my honest advice on that, without having gone through the numbers on it, obviously, but again, they're not seen as mission critical, business critical services. And although what you do in a long term is very critical for an organization's business health, um, business is survival, and this is not going to be the first thing they go to. And that's where we are in UK. We're in survival.
Great. Okay, Jazakallah khair, that's good. So will be good to see and explore the market together from Middle East perspective, especially. The second one is you talked about smart cities. So my other company is the digital transformation company. So we've got these smart building solutions. We have our proprietary hardware and full solution working in some of the US new builds, and it's working really well. That probably is a good potential to collaborate with you on smart cities projects that you do. And you would already have those engagements with various companies. So company like this other one, where we have lots of experience in IoT and AI. So like top AI gurus in our teams, like PhDs in their fields, and done 20-25 years of experiences. So they've been with us for about 20 years now.
Wow.
So it's a very well-oiled, very deep knowledge-based machine. It's not just a new corner shop just opening up based on the chat GPT and say, yeah, we can do this as well. No, we know our stuff and we've done it, been there. What would you advise from that perspective?
Yeah, there is a market. There's still a market here. One thing with the UK is that UK is always attractive for foreign investments, and what I mean by foreign investments is there's a lot of money that comes into the property development market here. Despite all of its financial issues here in the UK, there's still lots of property being built, residential being built, and this is a new trend now. So all new builds have an element of smart infrastructure embedded within them, and so there is an opportunity here. But again, it's just making sure that you have something that is applicable to the market. Pricing points are going to be an issue here because again, there's a real crunch on the bottom line here in the UK, even when it comes to builds. If you look at the standard of some of the housing that's been built here in the UK, it's absolutely abysmal. And so these things are kind of seen as the extra. And so it really depends. If you were to be able to get in with a large developer, it's something that there is a lot of practical. Yeah,
And Middle East?
Middle East is much more. Again, because the Middle East is booming again with property and development and the build out of huge societies and housing sort of developments and these sort of things. And so there is always an opportunity there. What I would say with the Middle East is one thing the Middle East is doing very well now, which they are safeguarding themselves from being sort of picked apart by foreign businesses entities. Is they're granting their own indigenous businesses as much opportunity as possibly can be done. So what they would say to you is, rather than you coming in and selling your service into our market, is you come and sit here in the market, become a Middle Eastern company, become a UAE company, or become a Saudi company. So I was in Saudi Arabia in September, and they are very much saying to you that, look, guys, you want to tap into the Saudi market. Okay, one of the prerequisites is you need to open up an office in Riyadh. Open up an office, employ 3 people here in Riyadh, and there is a whole host of opportunity for you to tap into. But what we're not going to do is have you sit in London and you need to access this. What we could do instead is we'll put the money in and we'll get our students in our universities. We'll set up the incubators, the accelerators. We'll do all of that, and we'll build the same companies as you.
That's great.
And that's quite practically what they said to me when I was there last, because the UK is really struggling in innovation now. So we like to beat our chest, but we are so far down in the innovation and technology sort of rankings. It's actually quite bad in terms of we have very few new recognizable internationally sort of successful businesses that come out of the UK anymore. It's just not the case. And when you speak and engage with some of the sort of slightly further developed Middle Eastern countries and economies, and they quite openly say that, look, anything you could do, we can get done here anyway. So much cheaper, and it's a matter of 6 months. And so that's one thing with the Middle Eastern market is with the huge opportunity there. They are really safeguarding and ring fencing themselves. They're saying, look, if you want to be part of this journey, come and sit with us. Don't sit on the outside and think that you're going to eat from this cake. You might get bits and pieces, but no, you need to come here. You sort of, and there is plenty of programs. There's accelerator programs. There's lots of incubation sort of places, and the PIF or the Middle East. So in the UAE, you have a smart cities department that run accelerator programs where you come in and they practically check the sort of practicalities of your technology and see whether it is, and then they will send you out to the relevant sort of developers and otherwise. And so, yeah, again, like I said, with me, Asia, a fantastic book to read. If you are interested, that is Parag Khanna, The Future is Asia.
The future Asia.
Yeah, the future is Asia.
Right.
If you read that, you will understand why I'm so bullish on Asia over Europe. There is no measurable financial metric that the UK or Europe is doing better than Asia on at the moment. Asia is a phenomenal powerhouse now, where you have West Asia with the Middle East, you have Central Asia and South Asia, and then you have East Asia, where each one of those segments in itself are larger trading blocks and bigger economies than the entirety of Europe and UK. And when you bring them all together, there's absolutely no reason to even consider this part of the world anymore in terms of growth and everything. Obviously, you need to adapt yourself and make yourself applicable to that market. But the amount of transfer of wealth that's about to take place in Asia, I think 4 out of every 5 a new middle class family is being created in Asia. So there's only 1 out of 5 in the Western world. The amount of billionaires and millionaires and that sort of wealth being created in Asia just absolutely dwarfs anything in the West. And in the West, what the West benefits from is domiciles and people who don't actually live here, but their wealth is registered here, which is something that skews the metric slightly. If you would take that out, then it's like a complete mismatch. And so Asia is the place now, but Asia is very different to the West. But one thing that Western businesses are very used to is a slightly easier ride, where despite not having things that are maybe the best in the market, you still get your sales and you still get through. Whereas in Asia, it's very cutthroat now because everything is so cheap. Things can be done very fast. So you have to really have a USP and you need to know the market you're going into. But Asia is the space, and after Asia, it's Africa. It's not even Europe. I don't even at the moment, other than if you've got money to park up and you don't want to leave it in your home country, I don't see UK or Europe as being an investable sort of space anymore.
So that's a very different kind of insight, but yeah, good to hear a different perspective. which seems very practical, and I'm going to read this book as well. It seems quite.
Yeah, it's a brilliant book. It's a brilliant book.
Okay, wonderful. Any last thoughts before we conclude?
No, I think it's been fantastic to speak to you today, and I hope Allah grants you success in your initiatives, and I hope what we've spoken about today is of sort of practical use to listeners and people who take their time out to listen to what we've spoken about. But yeah, alhamdulillah, it's been a pleasure.
Jazakallah khair.
Thank you so much.
Wait, no, have you